The Joint Regional Transport Committee of Nelson and Tasman to order. I'm going to begin with a karakia. Tuia karanga, tuia kararo, tuia kawaho, tuia karoto, tuia tihi tangata, karanga te po, karanga te ao, humie huie, tahe ki e. Mel has just noted that and to be fair to Mel, every one of our regional transport meetings during the last term were in Tasman, and he has turned up at Tasman on time, but will be an apology for lateness and is relocating. I did want to just make some opening comments about this regional transport committee from this perspective with respect to the alternates and the main committee members. It is both my and Mayor Tim King's view that with the importance of transport to the region, that actually the legislation only allowing 2 members from each council is pretty inadequate. At the last term, I actually wrote to the Minister and said, hey, look, when the Transport Act was designed, they never expected 2 regional councils to be in this position. And you can see quite reasonably in a region like Canterbury, where you've got 10 local authorities, as well as the regional council, that 2 members each make sense. It doesn't make sense for us. Now, the way in which we have got around that is our preference, and if we were the writers of the law, we would have 4 representatives from each of the 2 councils on the Joint Regional Transport Committee. What that means in practice is that all resolutions need to be moved and seconded by the full legal members of the committee. That is myself and Mel Courtney from Nelson City and Deputy Mayor Brent Maru and Joe Ellis from Tasman. But for all practical purposes, and of course Emma from NZTA, but what I want to make plain to all members is for all practical purposes, I wish all 4 members to be full participating members. If there is not a majority across all of the 8 members, I expect us to be respectful of that view. And so if we do get during the term into tricky issues, I see those that are the permanent members treating the alternate members as their equals in the event that we get it, i.e. if there was not a majority amongst full 8 members, then I would not see us proceeding with it. We'll approach that. We generally come to our decisions by consensus. In the event that one of the members, let's say, for instance, Mel is not present, then he is able to delegate to his alternate that full voting right to either Lisa or Aaron, and we would deal with that in the same way with Tasman. So I just wanted to provide that context both for our officers and for members of the committee to understand as to how we intend to operate around that. I intend to confirm the order of business as per the agenda. Are there any specific interests that any members have in with respect to today's agenda? Deputy Mayor Maru.
Thank you, Mayor Nick, and through you. Just if we go back to apologies, can I just pass the apology of Councillor Celia Butler?
Absolutely. And for the purposes of the minute keeping, it is my intention for the alternate members, apologies and the like, to be recorded again in the normal way. So I'm going to move from the chair that the apology for lateness for Mel Courtney and for Celia Butler from Tasman to be accepted. Someone, Joe is happy to second that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
I come to the item of interest. Did any member have any specific interests related to today's agenda? That being the case, we move to public forum. The first item on public forum is a 10 minutes that we've set aside for NELSUS. And Pete Ollenshaw, and invite you to the table, Peter. Welcome. You know the drill.
Yeah.
We're all ears.
Thank you for allowing us to speak. Today, I just want to talk about 2 things. Firstly, the early buses, and secondly, the Hope bypass and how things have changed a bit with the infrastructure strategy coming out and the current fuel price issues. Just firstly on the buses, you won't be able to read this, but if I pass around the PowerPoint, you will. This is the old N-bus timetable, and you can see here highlighted that it had two buses, for instance, arriving at Richmond, 7:11 and 7:26, whereas currently we only get in there at 5 to 8, whichever route you take, one or two, it's only 1 minute difference. And I believe this was a mistake for when the timetable was set up for the e-bus, that these earlier buses from previous times were not carried on, and would very much like that to be reinstated. I believe that this was going to be voted on in the September RTC meeting, but was deferred until after the election. So I'd like to see this put forward. And just noting costs, there's no extra buses needed. It's just wages. So the $40 an hour, an extra hour for two drivers, maybe $20,000 a year. It's not the end of the world, and in the current affordability crisis and fuel crisis, it just makes buses more viable for more people. Secondly, I'm not sure if people are familiar with this, but the National Infrastructure Plan has come out from the Infrastructure Commission, and it's almost like a slap over the knuckles for the way we've been delivering transport, or at least the RONs, the Roads of National Significance. And it points out to changes that are happening, like the ageing population, that will mean that we'll need to spend more on health and potentially less on transport, and the ramifications for that. And it suggests that spending on transport will go down, or should go down, and that spending on electricity and health will go up. It says the land transport funding system is unsustainable, requiring 12.8 billion Crown loans, and the system should return to a model where renewing and enhancing an existing network is met by users. So that's going back to the way it was. And it points out that poor transport pricing means we spend a lot of time building roads to handle peak capacity instead of trying to spread the use through the day. So this is something that comes across quite clearly, that we should investigate congestion charging before leaping to do major infrastructure build-outs. Even in small towns, like small cities like Nelson. So what we're suggesting here is that with the Hope Bypass, the idea of having concrete flyovers for heavy traffic is a pipe dream.
Sorry?
But is a pipe dream, and we can improve the intersection hugely, which our good people in the NZTA are actually working on. But with things like congestion charging and fuel at $4 a litre, that is going to change completely the demand and the congestion issues that we're currently facing. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from colleagues? No questions? Thank you very much. We move to our second public forum presentation this morning, is from the Te Hunanui Business and Citizens Association. I invite Alec and Jacinda. Oh, I'm sorry. Have I missed the agenda? I have. It should actually be. I've got one step ahead of me. I should actually have the Nelson Tasman E-Bus Advocacy Group. My apologies. It was completely a misread of my agenda. You're entitled to say that the mayor should go to Specsavers.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the to the Regional Transport Committee for the opportunity to speak. Put up this first slide over there. Okay, my name is Mark Rosser, and I'm the administrator of the Nelson Tasman E-Bus Advocacy Group, which is a membership of around 1,200 e-bus users. Firstly, just a little about me and how I ended up in this voluntary role. I have a marketing and small business background, and I own several businesses over the years in both New Zealand and Australia, mostly involving excuse me, either wholesale marketing or retail hospitality. Excuse me. After retiring from the business life through my love of driving, I chose to spend the last 12 years of my working life as a bus driver here in our beautiful city of Nelson, and retired from that job some 13 years ago now, when our public transport service was operating under the NBus brand. So as a retiree, and with the introduction of the e-bus network back in August 2023, I could see a need to assist the elderly and other users in familiarising themselves to use the new network, given the level of technology used today to operate the service. This includes the use of B-cards for tagging on and off the buses, and the navigating of the e-bus website to access the online timetables and live tracking of buses, etc. I work alongside Age Concern, which organises many e-bus information drop-in sessions at various locations for community residents excuse me, to feel free to join us to have questions answered on a one-on-one basis on how to feel confident to use our e-buses to their maximum benefit. Our Facebook group page keeps all the information on using e-bus up to date, including relaying notification of temporary changes to the service that come about from time to time, such as route detours, delays for various reasons like roadworks and closures, etc. The group's focuses on increasing the e-bus patronage, which in turn puts more money into the fare box, thus reducing the subsidy required from the rating pool. We believe the quickest way to increase patronage is to prioritise making the service more user-friendly in the areas where there is the greatest influx of users. Recently, as we're all aware, the new bus hub opened at Millers Acre after the city's more centrally located interchange in Bridge Street closed down. We could see there would be some pushback from some of the bus users who were more physically challenged to manage the extra distance to Millers Acre when visiting Nelson CBD. Our group put forward submissions to consider the additional stops that you can see up there on the slide around the CBD periphery, where passengers could crisscross the CBD as pedestrians through various walkways and shortcuts to and from their destinations, rather than perhaps a sole option of a further walk to or from Millers Acre. We're very grateful to the Joint Regional Transport Committee that these 5 additional bus stops were approved for Halifax Street outside Woolworths and opposite Tahaki Street, across from the library for routes 2, which is Nelson to Richmond via Tahuna, 3, Artefida Hospital, 4, Proctor Airport, 5, Motueka, 6, Wakefield, and 7, which is the peak time morning and afternoon overflow buses between Nelson and Richmond. And also Selwyn Place is an inbound stop opposite the Cathedral Steps for Route 1, which goes right around the CBD and travels between Nelson and Richmond via Bishopdale. And the 2 stops in Vanguard Street outside Rebel Sport, which is also close to other major retailers such as Briscoe's, a warehouse, and Woolworths in that area for Route 3, Artefai Hospital passengers, and the Proctor Airport passengers on Route 4. From my observations on live tracking, all these stops are getting well used, which must surely encourage more passengers to use e-bus if these stops are going to bring them closer to their destinations. At the same time, the additional foot traffic to and from the buses on the CBD fringe must create additional vibrance and give it added exposure to businesses in these areas, thus potentially stimulating further custom from increasing bus passenger foot traffic. It is interesting to note that the added bus stops in Halifax Street each serves at least 6 routes every weekday, adding up to potentially 83 buses stopping on each stop to either drop off or pick up passengers. which greater numbers would be incomparable to the few people who would have previously used the same space as car parking for probably low turnover, mostly single occupant vehicles. With the use of the Selwyn Place inbound stop opposite Cathedral Steps becoming popular to maximise the patronage in that area, an outbound stop must be considered across the road outside the steps. It is a known trend that bus passengers prefer to have the return journey from the same location, especially commuting workers, and as a must if we're going to encourage more people to use e-bus by getting them as close as possible to and from work and other places of appointment in the CBD area, especially now with the Middle East crisis pushing up fuel prices so high that considering using affordable public transport will become even more likely for many. And it was interesting on the TV news last night that Auckland Transport made an announcement of something like 100,000 extra users on public transport just in the last week. So that's indicative of what can happen here on a lesser scale. Next slide. That might have to be zoomed in a wee bit. Just if anybody wanted to see where the routes were, I thought I'd include that in the slide. I believe even more can be done to increase the use of these additional CBD stops, which are very lacking in seating or shelter facilities, which is a high priority, particularly for the stops which are popular boarding ones. Can we suggest that the unused bus shelter located outside Woolworth St Vincent Street be located to the Halifax Street outbound stop opposite Huckley Street across from the library, which is right beside two busy pedestrian access ways through to Wakatu Square and that part of the CBD. Also, one of the two slimline underutilised shelters at the Stoke Interchange northbound just past the Turf Hotel could be relocated to the Selwyn Place outbound stop opposite McDonald's, which is a very popular stop, even off peak, with passengers often seeking shade from the nearby trees whilst they wait for their bus. Bus usage is sure to increase with such creature comforts. We've already been through the motions of trying to get the e-bus stops closer to Nelson Junction to benefit both workers and shoppers with no success other than the Regional Transport Committee approval to move the current bus stops at the bottom of the Wakatu Drive overpass and Nayland Road closer to Quarantine Road. This has not yet happened, which is believed to be caused by some pushback from some of the neighbouring businesses, which appear to mostly have off-street customer parking available anyway. Most of the cars parked in Nayland Road seem to be all-day parkers. There will be no loss of car parks giving way to moving the bus stops closer if the current bus stops are reinstated with car parks. This is still an urgent priority to capitalise on passenger numbers travelling to and from Nelson Junction. Now, the elderly love going to the Silky Otter Cinema in Richmond, but sadly, only the inbound stop right outside the cinema is handy. That's the blue one there. The one with the X is the outbound stop, which is way down the road in Berryfield Drive near Malone Crescent and beside empty sections instead of directly opposite the cinema to encourage the not so mobile elderly population to consider using the bus. If we consider moving the outbound stop back closer and the passenger numbers are then likely to increase. And this would be mainly an alighting stop, and so no seating or shelter would be obstructive to neighbouring houses. My final one is an urgent review needing to be reconsidering reinstating the Toy part of Route 3. That's the Artify Hospital Run, which was closed due to an isolated case of a bus driver having an incident whilst negotiating the roundabout at the top of Toy Street, not long after e-bus service originally began. The Elm Grove Rise in that area is a large new housing development. Needing a bus service reinstated along with the rest of the Toy area without further delay. So that completes my presentation, and I'm now open to any questions.
Can I thank you for the work that you run with the Facebook site? It's actually really useful as someone keeping in touch. There's some social media sites end up being pretty poisonous and negative, and I note the way in which you administer the site has lovely compliments of the bus drivers and actually is really useful information for elected members around the service. So can I just compliment, you've made some points today about some practical improvements that you would like to see. What's really helpful for the councils is having someone effectively facilitating that sort of conversation in the community. So just on behalf of the Regional Transport Committee, acknowledge that. Happy to take any questions
Thank you very much.
if members have it. It was a pretty good explanation in your presentation.
Thank you.
No questions? Again, thank you very much. We take on board and we'll be following up with officers on some of the specific concerns you've raised about the location of bus stops. The third presentation, my apologies again to the Te Hunanui Business and Citizens Association, and the floor is now yours. And I understand it's Jacinda, Alec, as well as Sue. Just grab a third chair if someone, any one of those. We've set aside 10 minutes for your presentation in public forum. We're all ears, you know the drill. If there is time within the 10 minutes to take questions, then that's helpful as well.
Thank you very much. Kia ora. I'm Jacinda and I'm the chair of the Te Hunanui Business and Citizens Association. We're here again to talk about safety, which seems to be a recurring theme over the past 20 years. Is that close enough? Great, thank you. We last spoke to this joint committee back in September when it was announced that there were going to be 200 plus extra logging trucks on the road, which was a very kind of scrambled effort, but we just wanted to reiterate that our concerns about the safety going for Te Hunanui Village and along the waterfront and Haven Road. We made a few suggestions and I don't believe any of those have been adopted as yet. The network is under pressure, costs are increasing. We will hear today about investment in infrastructure, roading, cycling and buses, but where is the investment in pedestrians or mobility impaired infrastructure? So we've just got some photos we will flick through and we'll talk to some of those, then hopefully Alec will talk and Susan's got a great display to do. So this is at the start of Rocks Road, just past the Te Hunanui lights. As you see, it's a truck with heavy load on and a car parked and the door is obscuring the pedestrian who's about to walk down towards KFC and the village shops. Here again, just past this point, you'll see a beach dweller sitting on the rock wall, a mobility scooter heading south and someone with a mobile home for sale in the parking area. It's the cycle lane to the right and then obviously the carriageway which has the trucks and other vehicles. Here you'll also see an empty truck, a logging truck, and in the front is a mobility scooter, which you probably can't see very clearly, with a cyclist held up behind them. This is the pedestrian refuge just opposite Raglan Roast, just before the lights, right by the car park to the beach. As you can see, it's very well used by cyclists and pedestrians. Here's on the opposite side of the road, a family out with children in prams and on scooters. Great to see that they're kind of alongside each other, but as soon as they get probably 10 more metres up the road or footpath, it becomes so narrow that you have to walk in single file. Here's another example where you can see cyclists on the footpath and a pedestrian's being pushed over into the parking or bus lane. This is a common occurrence daily. Another shot of a mobility scooter. The reason the mobility scooters, I've stopped and talked to several. I've asked, why do you use the cycle lane and not the pedestrian area? And they say that quite often they come across another mobility scooter going the other way and there's nowhere for them to pass and one of them has to reverse a long way. I'll come back to these at the end. This is looking at the state of the footpaths along the state highway. I did a tino to council. I assume that's who I talked to, not Waka Kotahi, about this foliage being moved off the footpaths in January. Nothing's happened. This is opposite the school in Te Hurunui Drive, where there's damage and raised footpath, which would result in a possible child falling over after they've crossed the road. I think we've all seen this. This happened at the Wakatu roundabout, or one of the logging trucks. Fortunately, no one was seriously injured. The concern here, I believe, Alec might be able to talk further, but he's spoken to 141 and they believe it was the camber of the road which was at fault here. We have other concerns about the camber of the road opposite Murray Street, which is just by the Parker Street Annesbrook turnoff, where you often see vehicles, including the e-bus, waiting to cross and they can't cross to go south. The camber generally, I've observed, is going towards the gutter on roads and on the state highway, having walked along it yesterday. And at Murray Street, it's quite a steep road. It actually veers back up. I don't know what the correct wording is for that, like the camber. So the vehicle is on a lean towards the inside of the pedestrians, and then all of a sudden it hits, and if it's at speed with an empty logging truck, which I've seen, it looks like it's not very stable. And I'd like, that needs urgent attention, I believe, because I think it's an accident waiting to happen. This is last night, and as you can see, a heavy vehicle parked outside the pharmacy near the medical centre in Te Hurunui Drive with an empty logging truck heading back to their depot. If you look where the tyre is on that parked vehicle, he's pretty close to where he can get with that light there. He's way over in the cycle lane, and I just question, where is a cyclist supposed to go in that scenario? Which this brings on to what Susan wants to talk about. They are in Haven Road, and the sign here was actually knocked over by a logging truck, and her husband or partner, Robin, went and actually fixed it himself to get it back up going. I'll bring something up in a minute, which happened about an hour ago, where a logging truck again went over into the cycle lane heading to the port and broke off a sign behind us. So they were clearly in the cycle lane. So there's a real concern for safety that something needs to be done. Do you want to do your
So the
presentation?
sign that's being rolled over, so I'm clear, is the cycle lane sign that's shown there. Is that the sign that was bowled?
It is, I think, I need to look on my phone. Can I clarify that with you in a minute, Nick?
Yeah.
But that, yeah. I'll let Sue do her
Sure.
demonstration of things.
So I think probably certain councillors will be familiar with Robin's earlier presentation on items which he collects off the road. Almost constantly, there's always something. And I said to him, it needs to be bigger than that. I'm wondering if I should do an Amy Shattock or whether I should just pass
Just
it
put them
out.
on the desk. Put them on the desk there so we can see them. You've got to take them out. I'm quite happy with the demonstration.
I said to him, where are all the rest? And he said, this is a small quantity of what we'll find on the road, what's dropped off trucks and other vehicles. And, but if it had anyone, it would be fun. That's just in all this here. We took out there. So that's just.
These are items that you've collected off State Highway 6 and the
Because we
Turnanoe
live
area.
almost opposite that particular building, or
Right.
perhaps diagonally back this way.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's always
I'll let Alex speak. Sorry, Alex.
Thanks. I'm Alec Woods. I'm a member of the community business community association, and I chair the Boathouse Community Trust. So I have an interest in how traffic along State Highway 6 affects not only us, but also what I call the restaurant precinct, the other hospitality venues in that area. And I saw a shocking thing the other day. A woman who would have been around about my age, I guess, she was trying to cross Nam restaurant from one side of Roxway to the other, and she had with her mother, who would have been, I would imagine, in the 90s on a walker, and the two of them just looked terrified. And I thought, well, this is not uncommon. People standing at the side of the road waiting for a moment to dash, and this sort of brings me to think that we really have to look seriously at a pedestrian refuge in that area. And also down by Restore, which is another area where business is picking up. There's a lot more activity there than there used to. But there's no doubt about it that with the attractiveness of the area, just in general, with the weather we've had, with the good deal on coffee that we deliver at the boathouse, we attract a large number of people, especially elderly cyclists, who are out there recreating. So you have these two kind of speeds, if you like. People who are out there enjoying the view, enjoying a bit of the exercise and the sunshine, coming up alongside others who are just trying to get along that stretch as fast as they are legally able to do so. And it's not a good mix.
We're well over time, but if you wish to make any summation points, Jacinda, you're most welcome.
I think I just want to conclude, this has been a political football about what's going to happen along the waterfront. We're not here to say one thing or the other, but I would request strongly that the panel here consider looking at a safer and more accessible pedestrian area, because that is the cheapest and the highest, other than people driving, use of people's active way of transport. So, there's 2 cycleways. Just to juggle within that, there has to be something that can be done without spending a huge amount of money, because otherwise it'll be another 10 years.
And just for clarity, the sign that you've put in front of us, the cycle sign, that was the one in the picture?
No, that's a
on
second
paper.
one.
Whereabouts was that sign?
So whilst I was heading in, just before I headed in, it's the turn coming into the port, and it does look like it's right on the side of the bikeway on the pedestrian area, but there's a cycleway on the road as well, so it pokes out.
Yeah,
But
it's a warning sign, and I've been knocked off there.
I'm just wanting
Down the corner.
to identify the location where this particular cycleway sign.
I think there's probably 50 to 100 metres between the 2 signs. Would that be fair?
Yeah.
And do we know whether it was bowled by a truck? Was it seen? Or
I believe it was seen. That's what I got the message this morning, or not long ago. There's actually someone's mirror, parts of a mirror. So,
Chris Gold, any questions from colleagues? That being the case, thank you for your presentation this morning. And is 141. Sorry, Sean, didn't see you up the back there. You're most welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you with all the challenges.
And you can leave all of those, Alec. We'll sort those out for you. Yeah, you don't need to take them. They can stay there.
At our joint council meeting yesterday, Sean, we heard from the port company on the volumes of wood that are coming through the port. There's an unusual upside to the councils as shareholders in that as a consequence, and there's some upside for the council, but it's all downside for the forestry companies. And I am in awe of the logistics job. In awe of the logistics job that your industry currently has in recovering wood. I enjoyed your presentation last year when you presented with us the scale of the challenge the industry had and the impacts on the road network, and really look forward today to giving us an update.
Thanks very much, Nick, and thanks for having me. And yeah, it's quite a tough act to follow. We all understood that the pressures that this event would have on the community, we take it exceptionally seriously with what we do as a business. Just to put it into context, and I'm talking just for 141, but I've also have my top of the South Wood Council hats on here. But the biggest event that 141 has had in its forestry estates to date, basically the trees have been growing for over 100 years in certain rotations, has been in the estimate of around about 1,000 hectares of wind damage. On the 12th of July, we had a wind throw event that was 5,800 hectares. So that's almost 6 times the worst that we've ever had in history. Unfortunately, on October the 23rd, another weather event came through and knocked over another 1,681 hectares of forestry. So we've seen, the last biggest event of 1,000 hectares was, I think, in about the 1970s that it came through. So what we're dealing with is really a once in a lifetime unprecedented wind throw event. It's exceeded the wind throw events that we experienced in Taupō on the back of Cyclone Gabrielle. So for a region, it's not insignificant. Sorry, I've just excuse my presentation skills. I don't know how. There we go. Those are the figures there. From a progress perspective, there's been a lot of complexities around it, but we're roughly about 30% through currently, and that's running at double the volumes that 141 was taking under normal conditions. So everything, the logging, the transport, everything's had to double up in the Nelson region. We're up against the biological factors. We've got timber degradation that's going, so it's in our interest to move as fast as possible. And then the market conditions are up against it. It's almost a perfect storm. And obviously with the recent global conditions and markets, fuel prices, it is exceptionally challenging for forestry at the moment. Just from a transport perspective, we're running it in the region of 150 to 200 trucks a day. 141 accounts for about 60% of all the volume coming into port. So you can basically add another 40% to that volume is the number of deliveries a day. That would work out in the past 6 months of approximately 41,000 to 42,000 loads of timber has been delivered in the 6-month period. After the last time I presented, we've worked hard with the port companies. So we've moved to a 24-hour operation. So 20% is moving in at night. We work exceptionally hard to try and get as much volume as possible through the night that it doesn't disrupt the public and the traffic. We also know the pinch points in traffic in the mornings, and we try really hard to make sure we don't have any bottlenecks or conflict with traffic in the mornings. That's the perfect world. We've got MPI, which is on the other side of town that we don't have to come through town. So our logistics team really do a big effort and try and manage the traffic, especially around the pinch points.
The 2 orange areas on the map are the areas where you guys are experiencing significant congestion. Am I reading that diagram correctly?
That's correct, yeah. It's coming through the Richmond area and then the Rocks Road area. So you can run from a turnaround time at the port, in the middle of the night, you can turn a truck around in about 46 minutes. But because of the congestion in the mornings, all the trucks end up arriving there at the same time, and the truck turnarounds are upwards of sometimes 2 hours. There's been trucks waiting for 3 hours at the port. Just a bit on the safety and just following on from the previous presentation, 141 and the contractors we use, safety is our paramount activity. That's what we do. The systems we've got in the truck, the Guardian system is actually a AI system that tracks the drivers. So any sleep events, everything, the seat actually vibrates and alerts the driver. We also get sent that footage for any sleeping events or any harsh braking or whatever. We have the GPS location, we have the truck speeds, and we've got the 0800 log truck number. So prior to the wind throw event, we were running at half the trucks. We had 15 calls to the 0800 log truck number with complaints and queries. Post the wind throw event, double the amount of trucks. We've had 18 since in the last 6 months. And I must say 2 of the 18 were actually complimentary hotline calls. So it's been pleasing to see that there's double the amount of trucks on the road, but there hasn't been this mass escalation in people calling in on the 0800 log truck number, which is very pleasing to see. every safety investigation, unfortunately, as I walked in, I saw this picture up on the screen, which is not a ideal sign for any company, let alone a logging company. This is something we really want to avoid. But rest assured that the owners of this truck, because we had to bring extra resources in, this truck is actually a North Island truck that came in to assist with the Windthrow effort. That whole management team of that company was on a plane the same day, flew down and did an ICAM investigation, which is a system that we use to investigate every single incident that happens with high potential. You can see the level of detail on that, on knowing the exact speed that the truck came into the roundabout, what happened, and you know, the speed that it was doing. That's all live tracked. There's cameras in that truck to see what the driver was doing, what the traffic was doing. So any incident that gets reported or happens, even the 0800 incidents, if you guys do request or someone wants to request, we can actually see exactly what is going on. It's proved invaluable not only for our business, but the police as well. They use it in any investigation that they have. They draw on that camera footage. So there's exceptional amounts of evidence that goes around. A lot of the calls that come in is of speeding. And this guy's been racing past my house, for instance, and you go and look at the data and he was going 23 kilometers an hour. So we get away from a lot of the noise, but we're not going to hide behind the fact that, you know, we only got 15 0800 calls. One maybe too much. And that's what we work towards is everyone says it's an unattainable target of 0 incidents. But if we don't strive for that, it's going to be, you know, one is too many, and that's our attitude. Just since the events and stuff, when we discussed and NZTA and what we can do together and stuff, and I just want to say a very big thank you to both Nelson and Tasman councils and the NZTA. We've managed to do some exceptional things through this. I think it was, stand to be corrected, but it's the first time ever that a state highway has been closed in order to get a problem sorted out. We actually strung cables across the state highway, which made us a lot more efficient in getting it out. What it resulted in is the state highway being closed for 15 days during working hours, but that avoided a 6 to 12 month stop-go traffic management situation. And it was a great collaboration between everybody involved. I think, you know, the roads got in and got their stuff done. There was fire mitigation next to the state highway over Spooners Hill. There was a lot of people. The Great Taste Trail got in there and they got all their work done. So it was just a very clear example of what is possible when we work together. And there's been a few more situations like that we've cleaned up a lot of the roads. And again, just supporting each other. Just again, you know, I noticed them working on Rocks Road the other day, starting at 6 o'clock at night. You can't imagine how appreciative we are trying to deal with this event and seeing that sort of, you know, not closing it at 8 o'clock in the morning and creating massive disruptions. So just a very big thank you for the consideration that the councils have given to what we're trying to do and working with us to resolve the traffic issues. And yeah, we're committed to safety, paramount for us, and yeah, just shared planning, working forward and seeing how we can get through this. Estimates at this stage, 141 should be, majority of it should be finished by come December. We'll push probably a few bits and pieces, but a lot lower level by March. We should be through it, provided we don't have anything between now and then.
Sean, thank you for your presentation. It is a huge challenge for the region. When we saw your presentation last year, many of us were nervous about the impacts on the community. And I thank you for your compliments of the public agencies that have been working with the industry on trying to get the work done with the minimal impact. A simple question from me before I open to colleagues. In the truck turnover that occurred at the Annesbrook roundabout, you noted that an investigation had occurred. In the previous presentation we had from the Tahuna Group, they made some comments about whether the road design was at fault. I'm just simply interested in knowing from the investigation that the industry did, what was the conclusion of the investigation into that truck roll incident at the Annesbrook roundabout?
Yeah. Our conclusion was the driver left the cross lockers on and couldn't turn the truck. But it has been, I'm not going to, the road is not ideal, but at the end of the day, the drivers are supposed to drive to the conditions of the road. And that's what we can't blame the road for an accident. That's my opinion. But that's how he got through 2 previous roundabouts with his cross lockers on and not having an incident, and whether the camber plus the cross lockers that he had on his truck, the cross lockers it locks the back wheels of the diff. That makes it exceptional, that they put on when they off highway, and apparently forgot to turn them off when he was on the road. I must also just highlight with that incident, it is a challenge that we've had to do is people that are not familiar with the area coming into the area. That was a North Island truck that was in our region. And a lot of the incidents, niggly stuff that we've had, especially around communication, radio communication, and those events have been external contractors that have come into the 141 system. So we're working diligently to make sure that the induction and familiarization with the area and the conditions is ramped up and done to a higher standard.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions from colleagues? Aaron and then Mal.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for your presentation, Sean. It sounds like clearing the wind-fallen trees is like 18 months of much higher track volumes than usual. Post that, how will it look? Because I guess there'll be trees that were meant to be harvested post that. They won't be so. For example, will it be 10% fewer track movements for 5 years, or what will it look like after you've cleared this backlog at the end of this year or March next year?
It's difficult to say. It largely depends on what the macroeconomics with the climate does on pricing, on how long it'll take to recover from this. But I think you can assume that we'll go back to 50% of the trucks that are on the road now will not be there post the wind throw event.
For our central city route, just to follow through from Councillor Stallard's question, is the impact of the closure of the Eves Valley, Carter Holt, Harvey Mill, meaning that there will be, over the long haul, more logs going to port than previously?
Correct. There will be an offset. There will be some that will be going to MPI. Residues from the East Valley mill used to go to MPI. Those won't be coming in as residues as chip anymore. It'll be going in as solid wood. So there will be a little bit of an offset. So it's not the entire East Valley volume will be coming into Nelson.
Yes.
But I would say probably about 60% of what used to go to East Valley will come to the port.
And then the other question, just to tease out Councillor Stallard's question. In the age class of wood that was blown over, and your presentation very helpfully indicates there's probably a total of about 6,500 hectares in the total.
Yeah.
Is there any particular age class that's been impacted? Because to follow on from Aaron's question, depending on the age of those trees, that will impact when the harvest date is going out over the next 30 years. In other words, did the windstorms particularly hammer trees that were 10 years old, 20 years old?
Yeah, so the highest age class is year 24, which is not unreasonable to deal with on age class, but it's had a wide distribution from age 12 all the way through to 28. So you won't really see a big dip or increase in volumes moving into the future. It will even out over the future. So it's quite a distributed age class that it's hit.
Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Thank you, Sean, again for this presentation. It was excellent, as Mayor Nick said last time, and you haven't disappointed this time either. Sean, you say 30%. Where are you with the timetable? Are you satisfied with 30% at this point in time, or has it gone over time, or where are we?
I wish I was at 70%, to be honest, but I think what the challenge was the second storm that hit. So we planned by the time, the first time I presented, it was in September, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, and then that second event hit in October. So that's extended we can't do anything faster. It's just extended the time frame. So, but on that thing, we expect to be at the levels that we're at the moment. We had a bit of a, to get something like this going, I think we took 3 to 4 months to actually start getting into our straps. And then we've had a bit of disruption, about 4 days of non-productive things just because of congestions and the things that we've at the port, we couldn't get volume through. So there's been a bit of disruption, but by and large, I think everybody's worked together and understood the pressures that we're under, and it's been a fantastic result in my opinion. So 30%, I'm pleased with where we are at 30% today, and yeah, hopefully we can get it done by Christmas.
And just tease out Mel's point, have we passed the peak in terms of the volume of logs moving through the city from the Windthrow, or will it be a reasonably steady state through to December this year?
I believe there'll be a steady state through to December this year. The impacts on the situation in Iran is going to be a very telling thing, because it's whether the Windthrow can ever be recovered as a cash positive at the moment is the big question on everybody's minds. So it's whether you want to recover it and make a loss is what we're heading at, with a lot of the impacts on the fuel.
The issue being the increase in the fuel price, substantially increasing both the harvest, getting it out of the forest and transporting it to the point where it may
so
end up as
our shipping rates have gone up $10 per cube already. Bunker fuel's up from $600 to $1,000 per ton. The impact on the fuel price on the logging and haulage contracts is accounting for already $8 per cubic meter. So we're in probably around about 20 New Zealand dollars to 25 New Zealand dollars worse off today than we were before the Iran war.
Sure. My last question is, you've been very complimentary, and there's been a very high level of cooperation between Whakatahi, the Tasman District Council particularly, and I acknowledge their staff. Is there anything further that public agencies can do to support the industry in that next 9 months of work for the timber recovery?
I think it's been great up until now. I mean, I don't think forestry sector's always been one that's, put their hands out, but it's just the collaboration, Nick. If we can just keep up that collaboration, and like I said at the last one, this is, these are just moms and dads that are driving trucks and trying to do the work, and everyone is hurting. We're all going to hurt as much in the coming months. So I think just that appreciation that we're also, moms and dads that work in forestry and drive trucks and stuff like that. And we're also just trying to make a living and do the best by our community. And I think that's, if we can share that message. I know you tried, and I saw the backlash on social media. I really appreciate that. And I understand forestry is not the easiest thing for councillors and everything to talk about, but support does go a long way. And I understand the public sentiment on it. And it's something we're trying to resolve as forestry. I don't think it's deserved. But the best I can ask for is just collaboration and support where possible, but within measure.
Good message taken on board, and I also think that 141 as a corporate citizen in this community, just the degree to which you're prepared to communicate and engage with us in the public sector is sincerely appreciated. Good luck. The part that I've is a huge achievement is being able to recover this volume of wood safely. And we wish you the best with the industry in the next 9 months and getting a huge job done.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we now come to item 5.1 on the agenda, which is the Regional Transport Plan 24 to 27 monitoring report. Invite Chris before the table. I was going to ask our Nelson City Council Deputy Chief Executive, Anna Alec, just because this is the first regional transport meeting, before you present your report, Chris, just to give the opportunity to Alec for any opening comments as we go about our work over the next 3 years. I did have a bit of a catch up with Alec, just so that we're clear as members as to the ambit of this committee. And this is particularly important in terms of our infrastructure committees. And just in terms of broad terms for all of us to understand, we do have the responsibility for the statutory roles that go with the Land Transport Act. And that's the development of the regional land transport plans and the reports like what we receive. It's fantastic having Emma and NZTA around this table, given the significant importance of state highways. And so this is the proper forum for us to be discussing any of the issues within state highways of all the Nelson or Tasman. Because the bus service is a joint service, then the core work around buses comes here. But we do need to understand that if there is any budget implications, then we need to go back to our 2 constituency councils for any budget issues. With respect to any roading issues that are strictly in one district, and I'll give you an example of my own street, say Quarantine Road, that is really an issue for the Infrastructure Committee of the Nelson Committee, and equally for Tasman councillors, where the issues don't relate to those questions. The primarily forum for those to be addressed is through the individual councils. So I just give that a bit of an overview as we go into our work over the training, Alec, from an officer point of view.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And look, for us, we want to continue the great work that we've done previously with working with our colleagues and our cousins at Tasman District Council and NZTA. We've always worked very, very well across the borders, as well as with NZTA, and we now have a public transport, and the collaboration between all parties is fantastic. So we're looking forward to getting the work on the go, and we know there's a lot of work ahead of us in terms of many acronyms that we need to get through, and the RLTP and the RPTP, and that's only the first 2. But we know what we need to do, and we're very, very keen to have this first meeting and collaborate as normal, and very keen to see how we go. Thank you.
The other part is just for clarity. Just as in the last 3 years, all the meetings were at the Tasman District Council. For this 3-year term, they will all be here. With respect to the role with myself and Brent, I expect the officials in any communications to me as the chair of the committee to be equally sharing those communications with Brent. If any members of the committee have specific items that you would like on the agenda, then to either communicate with myself and Brent. It's my intention about a week prior to each of these meetings to be liaison with Brent to work with officers on the agenda. So that's just a bit of an overview as to how we're going to try and operate. Now we proceed, Chris, with your report.
Thank you. As most of you will know, the RLTP, or the Regional Land Transport Plan, has a number of performance measures at the start of it, and we try and report on those annually back to this committee, so that you can sort of be informed on how things are going. So this report covers all those off, and I'll take the report as read if that's okay, and you can happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the report. Open for questions. Can I set the ball rolling? One of the things I was surprised by was the sharp increase of a 5.2% increase in traffic volumes that came through in the public reporting. Are you aware of where the source of that traffic volume data comes from, either NZTA or the like? This was in the economic report that came out 2 weeks ago, and it showed quite a substantive increase in traffic volumes in Nelson now compared with a year ago, and I was quite taken back by the 5% increase in traffic volumes.
We didn't go down the path of interrogating, contacting them to find out what data source they were using, but they certainly, I'm not aware of them coming to us to ask for any traffic volumes we had. So I'm assuming there was, they were looking at publicly available data, maybe through NZTA's open data portal or something similar.
So when you report on traffic volumes, here's the bit I'm trying to understand. The root source of information for me can either be the traffic counters, which the State Highway Service use sometimes, and we have, and then we also have the people purchasing their road user charges and that data that comes through tools like eRoad. What access do our officers have to the data around traffic volumes across the region?
So we use our own data counting sites. We have a mixture of ad hoc sites that we use for, we have them on about a 5-year cycle where we're going around and trying to cover every main sort of section of road, if you like. And there's some requirements the NZTA have of us in respect to that. And then we have some continuous monitoring sites, Waimea Road and Main Road Stoke, and the NZTA has one continuous monitoring site on Wakatu Drive It used to be one on Rocks Road, but my understanding is that got damaged a few times in a row for when it was rebuilt after slips and the like, and hasn't been reinstated.
Okay, and when I look at the road transport emissions on page 17 of the report, I'm assuming that is calculated off average national figures, or I'm just trying to get a sense of how do we, if I look at those figures of 155,000 tonnes of emissions, what's the basis for being able to calculate that? I'm guessing, but I'd just like to know. That is, do we take our best guess of the amount of traffic volumes, average that relative to? No, tell me.
No. So we have a greenhouse emissions model that we operate here. That's the climate change team have developed that, and that's developed in there's a sort of standard method for developing these things that is sort of industry recognised, and we basically what that uses is fuel usage. So every, I think it's every month or quarterly, all of the fuel companies in the region have to report to council the volumes of all the various fuels that have been sold. And so they are then used along with what we know about, what we know about the vehicle fleet and the various, the efficiency of the use of that fuel. There are obviously some unders and overs that occur with that. It is a regional model that we use for Nelson and Tasman, but obviously that's based on where the fuel is purchased. So we could quite well have some fuel that's purchased somewhere else, and then the driving occurs here, and that's not counted. But likewise, there's the reverse.
Your question perfectly answers my questions. I always want to know the source of the data, no matter where it comes from. It's not perfect, and you're quite right. I fill the truck up in Christchurch. I drive through Nelson Tasman roads. You're not including those emissions, but equally I might fill the truck up in Nelson and drive to Christchurch, and the opposite applies. The key thing for me to understand what's the base data that's being used for it, and you've answered that well. Other questions from colleagues? Mel.
Thank you, Minik. Thank you, Chris, for your report. I'm looking right at the beginning at the indicators, monitoring summary, and are there any, what are the areas that give you most concern, or officers and ultimately the council, of course, in this monitoring summary that you've given us? Because I do see that, 11 haven't been achieved and 3 or 4 have. So of that lot of that number that haven't been achieved, what are the standouts for you? Are there 2 or 3 that are of real concern?
I'm not entirely sure whether I'm far enough up the food chain to be able to answer that, to represent all of council staff and all council staff view. But I think from a, I work a lot in the data space, and the cause and effect side of things is a bit of a challenge with a lot of these performance measures. The influence that council has, or the both councils and even NZTA as a group represented here, have within an RLTP on some of these is not tenuous, but the influences represents a relatively small proportion of all the influences on a particular measure. So it's a little bit challenging, because we look at not achieved for some of these, and we look and we go, well, actually, we spent a whole lot of money on that, but we only might have a 10% influence over that, for example. So that's where the challenge lies, I think, and how we report these to you. As far as how we might respond to that, that's certainly going to be part of developing the next RLTP.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, that's why I'm asking the question, because I thought if there are going to be some that are going to be challenging for you to meet the requirements, we're going to have to allow for that in our annual plan or our long-term plan. And
Yeah, and that'll be part of the workshops that we run as part in the lead up to the RLTP. Absolutely, discussions around whether these are appropriate, the performance measures, whether they're appropriate in themselves, and then if they are, then what response there's likely to be given the funding that will be available or may be available through NZTA, for example, and our local funding share.
So just to follow up, excuse me, Nick, sorry for this. It's difficult for you today to name one or two or three of those performance measures that might be challenging going forward, that are concerning you or officers of this council.
To the chair, if I could perhaps answer that. I think it's a little bit premature in terms of looking forward until such time that we've actually had a chance to put that data through and work through that with the committee as part of the workshops. This is obviously looking back, and I think Chris has answered this. I was just listening to his answer. I think he's answered this pretty well. I think there are certain things, and even we have them even in the NCC, and as well as Tasman have theirs, there are certain things that are out of our control. But if I look, for example, at death and serious injuries, a lot of that is out of our control, no matter the amount of work that we put into that. But when I look at that stat, for example, it's decreasing, but we still not achieved that. I guess they can be a little bit disheartening but there are external factors that we cannot take in, that are not. Or something that we can be held accountable for. But having said that, there are a number that are mandatory that we have to report. But I think in terms of looking forward, that's something that we need to work with the committee. And I just potentially don't think that that's something we can answer here.
Mel?
Right. Well, thank you for that. I'll scatter my thoughts and
I think the important point your question raises is when we come as a committee to write the new regional transport plan, we need to think quite carefully about what these measures are. And when I read through this report, there would be some refinements that I'd like to see us make. Now, to some degree, we're statutory constrained in consistency with the direction that we get from government that must be in our regional land transport plan. But we do have some flexibility, and I think we could improve on some of these measurements, and that will be a job we have to do in preparation for the 27-30 plan.
They appear to be not practical, some of
them. Deputy Mayor Aru.
Thank you, Mayor Nick, and through the chair. So just want to actually drop onto your side. It's the first acting member of the new term of this council for me. So good stats in terms of 2025 in our local roads. I just wanted to tease out the comment around the state highway ones and the analogy that there was a speed change late in 2025. Was that the causal was that the underlying cause of those crashes? Do you know? It's a statement. I'm just not sure.
Through the chair, it's a relatively broad statement that we, there's a number of things that contribute to crashes on our network, and it could well be one of the many things that's contributing to it. That's certainly the if you like, the most noticeable thing on change on that piece of road that we've seen over that time. Right. And therefore we saw it, we thought it was worth at least mentioning.
So maybe just one more tease through the chair is, so in the crash investigation, was the impact of the seriousness of the crash, was speed a factor that was noticed in those crash reports?
Through the chair, for the purposes of this report, we haven't gone down and looked at the individual crashes.
Yeah.
But for this report, we do for safety investigations. But again, this is more at that high level.
Thank you.
A follow-up question on the safety issue was what surprised me in the data on page 10 around fatalities on our roads was that the road toll nationally for 2025 was our lowest in many years. Nationally. Do our transport officials have any view as to why the national trend was actually very encouraging, but the local trend was different? Now, I'm always very cautious. One swallow doesn't make a summer. And with crash data, you need to be quite careful to take a longer term perspective on trend lines rather than just a single year. But I would be interested following through from Councillor Murray, Deputy Mayor Murray's question as to did officials have any view over 2025 as to why our trend in fatalities was the opposite to the national trend?
Again, for the purposes of this reporting, we didn't go delve down into that sort of detail. We certainly would for the workshops coming up and all that sort of thing. That's when we'd bring that to you. But yeah, it's like you say, you're correct in that those longer term trends are really what we're trying to see. Once we get down to some of the numbers that we're talking about for the Nelson Tasman area, there's a natural variability anyway. We're sort of starting to bump up against that sort of limit of, if you like, with the diminishing returns with spending. You know, if we could probably throw a whole lot of money at it, and we might still see that level of variability over time anyway. It's becoming a bit of an interesting one because we, you know, back in 2021, for example, we had a particularly low year, and I remember there was a bit of celebration that we were, you know, things were looking really good, and then the following year it jumped up again for no apparent reason other than, you know, we hadn't changed anything in the network, for example, that would do that. So again, that links back to this rather the level of influence we have over some of these things.
Understand that, and I look forward as the committee works through with the workshops, and all we expect from our officers is just being able to give us that good technical data. Hey, look, there'll always be noise in the statistics, don't get too carried away, but if you do have a view that there is some pattern that is occurring that we should be aware of, then interested in that. Emma?
Just in addition to that, I'd note that in our monitoring of police performance in this region, there has been a significant increase in police activity targeted to the activities that are shown to be highly correlated with deaths and serious injuries. So their work in terms of speed, focusing on speed, distraction, people who are impaired by alcohol, and so on, they are working really, really well in this region. So we should hopefully also see some improvement with that enforcement backing up anything else that we're doing on the network.
That's helpful information. And where does the interaction occur between our transport officials and the traffic police around the translation of the data over as to where we see areas of risk coming through in the data? Does that occur from NZTA through to police, or do our transport officials also engage with police?
So we have a performance plan that we agree with police for the funding we provide into road policing, and we set national targets for the activity, and then it's up to police to determine how those activities are deployed at a regional level. And we simply ask that it's done based on the evidence, both of what's happening and where the risk is highest. And so we see that happen, and police then report to us on that.
Thank you. Now, this is I didn't know where to ask this question, but I'm going to be cheeky and ask it now. When we had the public presentation from the Te Hūnanui group this morning, there was the questions around the footpath and its interaction with State Highway 6 in Te Hūnanui. Here's my question. When does the boundary occur between what works on State Highway 6 are the responsibility of NZTA as compared with the Nelson Council? I'm assuming NZTA is responsible for the road corridor and that NCC is responsible for the footpath, but I'd love to learn as we work our way through, just as a learning exercise for your new chair who's trying to get up to speed.
It would probably be interesting for Emma to give an answer and for me to give an answer. I'll start off with putting the onus on. The issue of footpaths is definitely NCC.
Yep.
And things like signage and things will be our responsibility as well. So it's interesting looking at and hearing what was today in the public forum. And it would have been nice to have asked the question is whether they report those signage matters so that we can actually get that into our system. But the footpath and the signage, etc., is our responsibility.
So I understand it. The footpath is the council's. Let's say I want to put a sign on the footpath to tell people that cycleways or whatever. How does that incur in the agency? Sorry to dig down to the detail, but if I understand not this way, I'm less likely to ask dumb questions over the next 3 years. So if there is signage on the footpath that is to service the state highway, that is paid for in the responsibility of NCC or NZTA.
It's good that we agree, Ella.
And we didn't even collaborate before. So
we use the terminology curb to curb.
Curb to curb.
So we do curb to curb, and then councils will do the footpath. The signage it depends on the nature of the signage, and so obviously state highway signs will be approved, installed by us, usually on our road reserve, and we generally work together on these, and the regulations around the signs, the placement, and the size and what's on them is all it's universal. It applies to everyone. So we work through that together, and in some cases, councils will say we want to put a sign here, and so we'll just work through that and make sure that they're appropriately spaced and visible and not providing distraction to drivers or impeding cycleways and things like that.
The one issue that I have some sympathy with the Te Hononui group is there are some signs that are intended to inform the traffic where the footpath is very narrow and the pole's right in the middle of the footpath, and that is a real difficulty for the increasing number of people on mobility scooters. Not urgent, but just something that over time we need to address. Councillor Courtney and then Councillor Ellis. Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Chris, I did notice in your report, and delighted to see it, on 3.11, what page would that be? 9?
So was I.
You are too?
I'm very excited.
I know you are. I thought you would be, and so are a lot of other people. The Graham Valley Road Reinstatement Update. Now, there it is in your report. It's exciting. It's an early announcement of this work being prepared for and planned for, because it's so important for our tourism, our tourists coming into the region, locals, Nelson, the whole region, because it's access, as you know, to Mount Robert via the Flora Hut and the Tablelands, and I thought we would never see the day. And I'm absolutely delighted. Would you like to continue with that, Mayor Nick?
It's really a Tasman district. So my understanding...
Doesn't matter, it's tourism.
It is. And I've had just as much of interest as much to the annoyance of some of my Tasman colleagues, because it's one of my favourite tramping areas to declare the interest. My understanding is that the Tasman District Council is contributing 100K for that project, that 85% of the funding is coming through from DOC. The report, as Councillor Courtney rightly refers to, is that project is going ahead in April. Jamie, is there any additional information that you would be able to provide the committee on the progress of the reinstatement of Graham Valley Road? I say rather cheekily to our good friends at NZTA, there was a time when NZTA contributed to the Graham Valley Road because it is of regional significance. We won't declare it a state highway today, Emma, I assure you.
Thank you, Chair. And just to deepen the intrigue, so that road is being managed by the Department of Conservation, and they are being funded by NZTA and by Tasman District Council, and with some DOC money themselves. But yes, progress is heading in the right direction. We've been working very closely with DOC, and work is to begin imminently. So everyone is pushing as hard as they can to get that work underway.
Can I just click, because I may have been very unkind to Emma and our friends at NZTA, is the non-council portion being funded by DOC or NZTA?
The non-council portion?
My understanding is that there is up to $100,000 or 9.5% of the project cost being met by TDC.
Yep.
It's also my understanding that DOC is managing the project, but the bulk of the funding is coming from government. And my question was, is it NZTA money or DOC money?
So NZTA are funding, and forgive me if I'm wrong, a reasonably high FAR rate or a subsidy rate of in excess of 70%.
Right.
So that would leave DOC needing to find between 10 and 20% of the cost.
Okay, it's both. That's very helpful. So look, I withdraw my comments about NZTA. They're being very generous in finding a good portion of it. And to your knowledge, Jamie, the project is progressing as planned. And I know there were some difficulties accessing the rock, but I understood that it was due for completion for next summer and that they're on track. Any further information?
Correct, yeah. So everyone is working towards a completion date this winter. It's a challenging site. That's an understatement.
Yes.
There's various challenges there, but all going well, it will be open this winter.
Mel, did you have anything further you want to follow up on Graham Valley?
No, I'm just so delighted on behalf of the people of the Great Agreement. And there's hope. Oh, very sorry. I like it. Going to start on the early April 26th. Everyone's by surprise. Thousands of people go up there every year. Thousands.
It is the most important access point for the Kahurangi National Park, and that's why there is very significant public interest across the region. I really appreciate the work that is going into its repair. If there are no further questions, I'm sorry, Councillor Austin.
Yeah, through the chair. Hi, Chris. So I'm just interested in your data counting mechanism that you're talking about. And I'm interested to know, does that just count the vehicles, or does it give more information like what type of vehicle it crosses to do with weights or anything like that?
Through the chair, it does give a vehicle classification, so it breaks down by, it looks at the, rather than weight, it looks at the axle spacing, and there's an algorithm that determines from that axle spacing what type of vehicle is crossing over. So we get they call them bins, so light vehicles all the way through to your heaviest vehicles with multiple axles and trailers and all that sort of thing. So it's all included in that data.
So that gives you something like a 6-wheeler or a B train or something like that?
Through the chair, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
And my apologies to Councillor Ellis, who should have gone earlier.
Thank you. It was actually a bit naughty because I just wanted to come off your conversation about Wakefield Quay and State Highway 6 through that Tahona area. Given that there's obvious pinch points, we saw from a lot of those photos, users are overlapping and being constrained in a really fine area. And with the government's changes coming about road use, given that it's such a tricky area to manage, is there any work plan for a review of how that road is managed in the future and the users of that road, whether a redesign or a rededication of different areas of that highway coming?
Joe, very happy for the question. We have got the broader update where we put Emma in the hot seat under item 5.5. Happy to take it if you want to comment, Emma.
Just not if it's coming in the future.
Wish to defer it either yourself or Alec to comment on anything. Just for your information, there is one area of which the council is leading a project of which Mel Courtney is the chair of our task force, but that is quite specifically around that top end of which the council owns substantive properties and has commissioned some design work around the redevelopment of that area. But that's only a small portion of the question that you've raised. Emma?
We continue to look at it. It's a very narrow corridor and it's obviously bounded by a cliff and a seawall. There's not really any space to reallocate road space within the width that we currently have available. As you'll be aware, in the Nelson Future Access plan that was developed some years ago, it did have proposals for both the replacement of the seawall and then associated widening to improve that amenity for all users. So that remains the most recent strategic plan for what we would do on that route, and we'll continue to consider whether that's something we can bring forward for future funding.
The one, Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Minik, and thanks, Chris, for the report. That is a monitoring report. What is the monitoring period that's being reported on?
Through the chair, it does vary slightly depending on what data is available. Some of the data is very up to date, and so we're able to do a calendar year through to December 2025, end of December. Other data, there's much more of a lag, and so we're only able to really do the previous financial year. So normally we would bring this report to the RTC closer to September, October, but because of in an election year, traditionally we've brought it more this time around March, the first RTC meeting of the next calendar year.
Great. So it's not an annual monitoring report. It's like once per council term to set us up for when we go into developing the new plans. Is that the case?
Through the chair, no, we do report annually to this committee, but just the period of the data that will vary slightly depending on what's available.
Okay, and I guess I asked that because by my count, it was of the 13 targets related to objectives, 3 were achieved, 3 out of 13. So I'm just wondering what the response of this committee is to that. And I'm guessing we consider that as we develop the new, if we're doing everything annually, year by year, we might say, okay, let's convene a workshop and we need to look at why there's only 3 out of 13 being achieved. But it sounds like we're going to factor into the workshops that lead up to the development of the new land transport plan. Is that the process? Okay, so we bear that in mind, and for the 27 to 30 land transport plan, we think about why only 3 were achieved and what we do about that. Thank you. And I guess as part of that process, we will be revisiting the objectives, indicators, and targets. Is it? Okay, thanks. Following on the previous discussion around a possible link between speed limit changes and DSI crashes, and bearing in mind it's just a possible link because of the short length of time, and we haven't dug down into the data to see what speeds the vehicles were travelling. In the case that there is a link, let's say on the local roads there's better speed controls and we've seen fewer crashes. On the state highway, speed limits have increased and there are more DSI crashes. So let's say there is a link. What do we do with that information? Do we, I'm guessing, Emma, that your organisation would be all over this anyway and regularly looking at speed limit changes and crashes and where there's a problem. So does this committee need to do anything with that and package it up and talk to anyone, or is that being handled anyway?
The current process for speed reviews is as set out in the rule. So any party can bring to our attention an area that they consider warrants further investigation for a speed review, and we can then look at whether we have funding available and whether it meets the criteria in the rule, and go from there. So we do look at this ourselves, but we also respond to requests and evidence provided to us from community.
Thanks for that. And so I wonder, Minik as chair, what we should do, maybe this is a watching brief for us, so we just have that one spike in 2025 where the higher crashes on the state highway, and I guess if it was repeated in 2026 or even worse, then it might indicate there's something to look at there. But I guess personally I think it's something to keep an eye on, but maybe we don't have enough data yet. 2 more questions if I can. Air quality data in the report, the number of exceedances are presented for TDC, not for Nelson, in terms of PM 2.5. So there's 60 odd exceedances days per year in TDC. The Nelson data, I think, was 70 plus exceedance days in 2025 compared with WHO guidelines to keep it within 2 to 4 exceedance days. Is the comment is in here that we can't discriminate between the contribution of perhaps, traffic obviously, and then other sources like wood burners. That's made specifically to Nelson. Is TDC, have they done the work to discriminate those two sources for their PM 2.5 pollution, or it just hasn't been commented on in the report?
Through the chair, it just hasn't been commented on the report. So there is some national research that was done. I can't remember how many years ago, but it was quite some time ago, that looked at the relative contribution of all the various sources to the total of PM 2.5. The conversation I had was with our Nelson air quality person in-house here, and her comment was, when I pressed her and said, so, if we had a 50% reduction in PM 2.5, could we therefore say that, we'd had a 50% reduction in transport-related PM 2.5 emissions? And she gave a very clear no, that's not the case at all. That research that was done was a point in time, if you like. And in Nelson in particular, I know Tasman has had a focus on reducing emissions from fires, log burners and open fires, but there's been, I know a very, very strong push over the last 10 years or so here in Nelson, especially in those areas around where those monitoring sites are for the PM 2.5 for home heating emissions reductions. And so it would be remiss in claiming all of that reduction, that same percentage reduction in transport related PM 2.5.
Yeah, so I guess in summary, NCC and TDC are in the same boat really. We have 60 to 70 exceedance days per year for PM 2.5, where WHO guidelines say fewer than 4. We can't discriminate between traffic sources and home wood burning. And we are waiting, perhaps, we haven't had PM 2.5 guidelines at national level, and that might come. And then the good work we did in Nelson over PM 10, we might have to look at it again for PM 2.5 if we get national level guidelines. Is that the case?
Yes, that's correct.
And just finally, if I can, just getting back to the presentation earlier around the pedestrians and mobility scooters around Rocks Road. And sometimes I think members of the community it's a bit unclear what we say to them in terms of who's responsible for what around there. And me and that was teasing that out. And we heard the curb-to-curb responsibility of Waka Kotahi. But does Waka Kotahi take, in the case of a state highway, do you take responsibility for providing for vehicles and cyclists? And for example, if the road is not wide enough to accommodate that, would you take responsibility for sort of a road adjacent cycling infrastructure, even though it's not strictly curb to curb?
So cyclists are legal road users in any case, unless it's a motorway, in which case they're not. So on all the roads in this region, cyclists can legally use them and should be respected as such. If there is a government policy statement and funding in place that allows for off-road cycle facilities for commuting purposes, then we will look to identify and prioritise activities that can be done under that category of activity.
Okay, so if we sort of localise it a bit, let's say the policy statement was favourable towards active transport infrastructure, and from the Nelson Future Access study, there was a move to implement that cycling walking boulevard. Waka Kotahi might be involved in the funding of that, even though it's not curb to curb.
It's a little bit complicated.
I didn't hear that, Emma.
It's a little bit complicated. The first issue that we would be directing our attention to, for example, in relation to Rocks Road in particular, is that at some point in the next 50 years, we will have to look at replacing the seawall. So from a resilience perspective, that's a really critical thing that we need to do. So when we look at that, we obviously look at how and where we do that, and if that was to result in additional space that could be utilised in that way, then that would be a useful way to proceed. But there's not really any other opportunity in there. It's the current space doesn't allow for it.
Thanks. Did you say next 50 years? So it's not imminent. It's not next 5 years or next 10. It's beyond 20 to 50.
I'd have to get advice from our engineers on that.
Thank you.
Could I just tease out again? I'm just trying to improve my understanding, Emma. You know, the adjacent to State Highway 6 and the Stoke Bypass, there's a very significant cycleway that feeds into the Great Taste. And either you or Alex might be able to help me. Is the maintenance and the design, any improvements of the Great Taste cycleway a responsibility of NZTA or Nelson City Council on those, the significant cycleway that runs adjacent to the Whakatu Drive State Bypass? Either of you know? I'm just getting in, trying to get in my head as to when do I beat up Alec and when do I go after Emma? When do I talk to Alec, I think?
Yeah. Now we understand that. So I think you're talking about the stretch that runs directly next to State Highway 6 from the aquatic pools all the way, way down.
Yeah.
So in terms of any improvements, and stand to be corrected, but in terms of any improvements to that does not rest with the Nelson City Council.
That's NZTA. And the same with the maintenance side.
The maintenance is not by us.
And then just one more teaser question, which is relevant to the public forum. The Te Hunanui residents raised the issue of pedestrian islands on State Highway 6. And we very helpfully, 18 months ago, installed 2 additional pedestrian islands, of which I've had fantastic feedback. And I think the photograph they showed does make a significant difference to the safety. Are pedestrian islands within the 2 curbs the responsibility of NZTA or the City Council?
Well, if we're going to install any assets on the State Highway, that's definitely NZTA. We have looked at that location. It is actually a really complex one to add any additional infrastructure into the road corridor at that point, in terms of both the width of the road, but also the parking and the turning movements of vehicles going in and out of driveways and other things there. In order to get, because with those refuges, we like to obviously have good access off the footpath, and that requires, and visibility, which requires removal of car parking. And in those locations, obviously, there are businesses that rely on some of those car parks. So they are challenging, and we have to work quite carefully with those local businesses and others, as well as our safety experts, to assess how to balance those different needs.
So the good answer you've given me, the pedestrian refuges are the responsibility of NZTA, but they're not without difficulty. And I understand those and have seen some of the reverse community pressure. So it's not an automatic. I think we've had a good go at the Regional Transport Monitoring Report. I'd like to move the recommendations that we have in our agenda on the acceptance of that report. Is Joe happy to second? Thank you. I'll put that. That's on page 5 of our report. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, say no. That report is received. We move to the next item. I'm going to suggest we just have a 2-minute stretch, grab a coffee, and when we return, welcome Lyndon and Alex on the regional land transport and public transport plans. The committee's quickly adjourned just for 2 minutes. plans. Welcome to Lyndon and to Alec. Sorry. Alex abandoned ship. Man, we can cause some trouble in his absence. Welcome to you both. Look forward to you presenting a report, of which there is quite a lot of interest, probably also flowing from the presentation we had from the eBus public forum this morning. In your hands.
Through the chair, so I'll just do a brief comment, then I'll hand over to Karen to lead us through. I think very much the order of the papers were provided today were aligned to the comments we've had today. So the monitoring report very much gives you an understanding of where we're at. This report talks about the two key documents that this committee develops, which shapes things going forward. The next report talks about the work program to develop the next version of those documents. And then the PT report talks about the real stuff that's happening at the moment. So we've sort of framed that up. You've had an intro on where we're at. We'll cover off in here the two key documents that this committee is responsible for. And then we'll work into how we develop the next version of those documents. So Karen.
I'm happy to go through some highlights of the paper, or we can take it as read.
Why don't you highlight the paper quickly and then we'll take a few questions.
So obviously you talked in your introduction about the role of the Regional Transport Committee, so I don't really need to go through that. But the development of the Land Transport Plan, or the RLTP, it's a requirement under the LTMA to review the land transport plans every 6 years. But there's also an interim step every 3 years. We're at the 6-year period, so this is a full review of the RLTP. The RLTP is our long-term vision for the transport network, but it's also how we get projects funded. So to be able to get funding through NZTA and central government, we have to put the projects up through this process. What's not in the report is the RLTP does include projects from the State Highway Investment Plan as well, which is the SHIP for another acronym for you, and also any dock projects as well can go through the RLTP to seek NZTA funding through the NLTP. The current RLTP has a number of objectives, which are listed under 3.8. If our transport network, if the problem definitions that we've also included haven't really changed, then the objectives are probably not likely to change. And we're probably proposing that we just do a review of those rather than do a full investment logic mapping that's required. But we do, obviously with the new GPS coming out, the government policy statement, we will have to review these objectives under that. So we are proposing to run a workshop to cover that. As a subset of the RLTP, we have the RPTP, which is the Public Transport Plan. That has some specific objectives as well, and they're listed under 3.13. Just to note that the current RLTP and RPTP are aligned with the government policy statement for 2024, and that should say 2027 under 3.14. And that had 4 strategic priorities: economic growth and productivity, increased maintenance and resilience, safety and value for money. So they all are currently aligned. But as I said, in conclusion, the new government policy statement is due sometimes around the end of March, we think, although it does keep changing and being pushed out. But that's the current date that we have. So at that point, we will have to review our strategic objectives under the GPS. And also just noting that the last RLTP, the strategic objectives, there were no weightings under those objectives. So we are proposing that at some point we look at those strategic objectives and put some weighting towards those to align with our current, with the committee's current views. for the network and using the monitoring reports to influence those. That's effectively it.
I thought what was very helpful for the committee about this report, particularly for new members, is to understand the program of work that we have underway and the timetable that you've set out in paragraph 3.12 for getting this job done. The piece that I would want to signal is I think the GPS is sufficiently important that we're likely to want to make a submission, so we should get the process underway for elected member input into the submission on the GPS. And the one question I had about the program, we approve a draft of the plans on your schedule on the 3rd of November. It's just a check so I understand. Are we required to hold public hearings on the draft land transport and public transport plan?
Through the chair, you've jumped ahead of paper. Do you want us to cover both the intro to the documents and the plan at once? Which it makes sense to do that.
Yep.
But as long as we just understand the context of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry for that. I am ahead of myself. What is the easiest for officials to deal with the two together?
We're quite comfortable to do that. Yes.
Just as long as you pass
the two resolutions.
Yes.
Yeah. Why don't what we do is take any questions or commentary on the two reports, that is the regional land transport and public transport plans introduction and the joint regional transport work program together. They are interrelated.
Yes.
If members are comfortable with that, and then what I'll do is I'll just put the two resolutions together. Are you happy to then address my question, which is around, are we required to have public submissions on these two land transport plans that under your timetable we're going to be putting out in about November?
So we've factored in public submissions on the document for early next year. So
no, I understand that.
Yeah.
The crisp question, are we required by law to have public submissions? I know we get written submissions.
We're required to consult and we need to confirm the nature of that consultation, but I'm understanding it's a still local government consultation.
That's right. So to answer your question, it is yes.
Yeah, the answer is we are required to hear the submissions that we receive, which we'll be doing January, Feb next year. And a follow-through question, and I'm sorry just to be so direct and political, I'm into maximising the amount of money that we can get out of our good friends of NZTA and in government, and for us to maximise the opportunity to do that. There may be a different set of priorities in the event that there is a change of government. We just need to say, well, the public's going to make their decision. What is our capacity if, and you quite astutely noted in the timetable the general election date, will we have time to change our priorities in the two draft plans in the event that there is a different makeup, and the government can be different in the sense of a different lead party, but it can also be different in terms of its coalition partners. What's the flexibility that we're going to have in November in your timetable to change priorities if we have a government offering a different direction?
Through the chair, so the reality is that you went through that process last time in the formation of the document you've got in front of you. My sense is that from a broad nature, the objectives are quite balanced, and what we would end up doing is changing potentially the emphasis or the priority in the program of work. Yep. The reality is across the Nelson Tasman region, we have a limited pool of projects and we have a range of projects. So I don't think it will be totally reshaping a list. It may be reordering that list to better reflect the changes that come through in the GPS. The challenge last time, and potentially looking forward if there were a change in government, is the time it takes for that government to refocus and determine what its GPS will be. We may get a draft potentially by February, but we may be operating in forming our program based on a draft, which is what happened last time.
And what you've got is you may have a GPS from current government telling us to do this, You've got a new government, you know they're going to change it, but you don't know how yet we've still got to finish our land transport plan.
Yep.
And that creates a bit of a gymnasium exercise.
And the reality is that happens, and we work through it, and we make the best of that situation, understanding the whole country's in that same situation.
I don't mind where you'd like this question.
Through the chair, can I say
absolutely sorry.
We have experienced this many, many times, and sometimes we've had to do this within 4 weeks, sometimes within 6 weeks, and we always seem to pull something out of the hat, but it is pretty stressful. But we always seem to do it, and it's never easy.
The key thing for me is us just keeping sufficiently nimble-footed with the eye on the ball of maximising the level of investment, whoever is the government, in our transport network locally. I'm happy for you to defer this question to the next report if you prefer, but it is mentioned in this report, and that is the Moto Move rollout of the National Ticketing Service. Am I to read from your report that the current expected go date is September 27 for the Nelson Tasman e-bus service?
Yes, that's the current proposed timeline.
Thank you. Any other questions on these two interrelated reports? They are an opportunity for us to get a feel for the work we've got underway around developing these two significant plans.
That's me, Nick. Think the first one, Lyndon. Are there any aspects that where lights are on? Does that matter? Yours are too. So that's all right. It's going okay. Both red lights are on, but we're not going to panic, are we? No, we're not. Lyndon, this is sort of updating after a 3-year period, isn't it? So what changes? Can you just highlight some of the changes, obvious changes that are planned? I know we're going to have a workshop.
Through the chair. So the first phase is very much looking at the strategic front end of the document, understanding what's changed in the overall environment, and looking at the context of the government policy statement. The government policy statement that comes out will be drafted by the current, so we don't expect significant changes from that, but that'll give us a context to check the strategic front end of the document. And then we will look to build our programs. Now, we need to understand that the programs in the Regional Land Transport Plan are submitted by the 3 organisations. So based on Nelson's Asset Management Plan, Tasman's Asset Management Plan, their programs will come forward. The State Highway Program will come forward, and we will amalgamate those in the document, and then you'll go through a process of prioritising those from a regional perspective, understanding that those programs are the programs of those partner organisations. So what you're doing is understanding the regional context of those programs and giving that regional context and prioritisation of them to submit our view to NZTA on the funding priorities for the region. Yes, that'll be
through workshops.
That'll be so our process for this is very much workshops to take you through the detail, following 2 or 3 weeks later by a meeting where you can approve or check that direction of that and sign that off for the next phase.
Yeah, Nick, I'm happy to move this plan. This first one, the Regional Land Transport and Public Transport.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Courtney and Deputy Mayor Maru. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Carried. Move to the next report, which is simply to note the Joint Regional Transport, the work program. I'm happy to move that from the chair. Is Councillor Ellis happy to second?
Sorry.
We've had a pretty good discussion on that as well. It's really just noting the work that we've got ahead and doing the preparatory work for the program. I'll put that second resolution as well. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. That is carried. We come to the next item on the agenda is the update on public transport.
Through the chair, I'll join Chris on this. Jane Murray's been involved in the development of the report, but unfortunately is self-quarantined homesick today. So I'll support Chris as he takes us through the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back again. This is a bit of a mixed bag, this one. This is partially informing you, giving you some an update of how the network's going, just some for information stuff as far as patronage and fare income and all that sort of thing. Giving you an update on how we're going with the review, public transport review items from the previous term, getting those implemented. And then there's a decision on that we're asking a decision from you for routes 1 and 2, those earlier services that we've talked about previously in the previous term, and you heard about in the public forum as well.
My first question is, a key recommendation today is to provide some additional early morning services at a cost of $40,000. The events of the last 3 weeks, with the huge increase in fuel price, had anecdotally, and I do condition it, anecdotally shown some increase in patronage, and I have had some email correspondence and comments from members of the public that those early buses are very full. In response to that, my question is, if we approve the resolution today of those additional early morning services, how quickly do you think operationally they would be able to be implemented given the current pressures?
Through the chair, that's probably a one for Brett, who's our operations man.
Well, I hadn't anticipated that question. Maybe a few weeks.
Can I put a question a different way? When the report was prepared and the proposals were to increase the services on that early morning run, when was the intended implementation date? And look, it's no surprise that the events that have occurred over the last 2 weeks, nobody could have forecast.
You mean after the last meeting? Back then when we first looked at it?
Yep. Okay. If in the normal course of events, we passed resolution and your recommendation for those additional morning services, when were you planning to implement?
We were going to implement them on the 1st of December 2025, the same as the timetable change.
Sorry, can I answer that one for this particular recommendation here?
Yes.
If this was approved, we're initially looking at the 1st of July, so a clean financial year.
Yep.
But there's no reason that we couldn't do it earlier.
I'm very happy with the recommendation. You can't expect you guys to do things instantly. I think the community would welcome it being implemented as quickly as practically possible. And I realise there would be some financial implications. The $40,000 extra cost is for the year. If we start a little bit early, there may be some additional costs. I don't know what other elected members feel. I think in the current circumstances, if it was possible operationally to bring it forward from the 1st of July and the level of pressure that our public is experiencing from the petrol prices, it would be good to get it started earlier. Councillor Stella?
And that is within existing budgets, just to clarify that in case people from TDC are nervous.
Yes, that's correct.
Councillor Murray?
Thank you, through the chair. So if we did move it forward, is it still within existing budgets? And I note that I think of the figures I've got for our share of the whole year is about $11,000 to $12,000, which is in budget from the 1st of July, I take it. But earlier implementation, is it still within budget? Like Jamie's saying?
Yeah, that's correct.
Through the chair, we had already budgeted for this to be underway. It's just taken longer. So rest assured that we have this already accounted for in our budgets. Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you through the chair. So no issues from TDC if it was to roll out for earlier.
So I'm taking from the mood of the committee that if the preference would be for early implementation as soon as practically possible. Councillor Courtney.
I can't see any reference, thanks, Mayor Nick, to Lyndon to the junction. Are we just not handling that? We're just not.
I'll field that one.
Yeah,
through the chair. The junction is a particularly complex one. We don't have any agreement at the current time with the landowner to put the buses through. There's certainly no requirement for them to do that in their resource consent. So, and there's the issue of the pavement through there being, what the ground under the pavement there is absolutely terrible. You can see that in the pavement on top actually breaking up very readily. And I've just spent a whole lot of money going and fixing it up. And so there's a bit of negotiation there to happen if we were going to do it. On top of that, there's a lot of complexity around just how tight it is for turning for the buses through there as well. With quite long wheelbases with big long overhangs. And so the tracking curves would require quite a bit of massaging of the locations of traffic islands and car parks and all that sort of thing. So with all those complexities in mind, we thought that the most prudent way of moving forward and continuing to consider that issue was to do it as part of the development of the RPTP, so the Regional Public Transport Plan. Then we can consider it more fully in the context of all the funding and all that.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. What's proposed in terms of the earlier buses on routes 1 and 2? Is that consistent with what was being asked for by Peter Ollerenshaw in the public forum earlier? I just want to know if we can say, there we go, you've got what you want, or is it different?
Yes, it returns us back to the getting people to work in the similar times to the previous N-bus system. Yeah, it's yeah.
Is there? I'm just keen to. Doesn't take away from the position about the moving as quickly as possible on that new early service. Do you have any data to support the anecdotal information that's come through about passenger numbers over the last couple of weeks? How quickly do we get that data?
I've actually, we do have, obviously, the time difference between doing this report and another month's data coming through from the data system that we use for collecting patronage data. There's definitely, I'd say that for January and February is very similar in that it's very much the 2026 patronage numbers have very much stabilised at that 2025 level. So we're not seeing any further drop off. We saw a sort of a stabilisation, but it's at a very slightly lower levels than the 2025 level, or sorry, 2025 versus 2024 for those latter months of last year. We're seeing that trend sort of continue, so it's maintaining that level of patronage. As far as whether it increases beyond the 2024 numbers, it starts to come back up again, we won't see that until the end of this month when we pull that this month's data out.
I notice Auckland has reported in the media today an increase in 100,000 passengers over the last week. We have no way of pulling data on our own bus service over the last week.
We do. It becomes a very much custom data set and bit of analysis that we need to do, as opposed to all the standard sort of work that we've done and that we can just drop our data into. Yeah, it is quite a bit of extra work, unfortunately.
Don't do the extra work. I'm going to accept the anecdotal evidence. You're going to go about installing it, introducing the new service as quickly as possible. But I think if other members share my view, is that if the data for March could be circulated to all members of the Regional Transport Committee when they come through the normal process, that would be helpful. Basically, I'm hearing you say the January figures for 26 were the same as January 25. February 26 was basically in line with February 25. I am expecting, based on anecdotal information, March 26 to be up significantly on March 25. That's what we've seen in other areas. If I could just ask you through the normal reporting that when you get the March data, just to provide a copy to all members of the Regional Transport Committee.
Absolutely. Can I just highlight that as part of our data quality process, we do need to leave it a few days or even even up to a week and a half after the end of March before we can interrogate that properly, just to make sure that any of the machines on the buses are fully downloaded and all that sort of thing.
I'm not wanting you to do any more work than you normally do.
Thank you.
For us to receive, and so I'm expecting about the middle of April a report from you on the bus patronage for the month of March. Does that sound reasonable?
It does. And through the chair, can I also just temper the as soon as possible. We will leave here and we will go and have that chat in terms of getting it as soon as possible. But we will push that. But please don't expect that on the 1st of April.
Understood. Understood.
We're asking that as quickly as possible.
We're asking our officers to go away and be practical and to do it as soon as practical, given that extra demand that we think is there, and we understand that there are just practical implications for even organising the timetable and the staff and those things for being able to achieve that. Can I just ask an operational question? We do provide a overflow bus. Principal routes of which I get these concerns is Route 1 and 2. Can someone just give me a feel, is that how is the overload bus organised and how is it funded? Just so I understand in terms of the timetable and other things and the public interest that we get both in the commentary on the website from the e-bus users and the like. Is anybody able to answer that for me?
Yes, through the chair, I can look at that and Brett can correct anything that I don't get quite right. Yep. But essentially we operate a couple of overflow buses in morning and afternoon services, and essentially it's addressing the demand from schools, and they follow through those number 1 and number 2 services in the morning. And in the evening. They've got pretty high usage. We generally find in March that we might have hit the ceiling on some of those, and then the users work out about when they get out of class in a timely manner, which bus, and generally by April some of those concerns, or most of those concerns, sort of disappear. These buses don't run during holiday periods or during the Christmas period. At the end of year last year, we worked with the operator to understand when volumes on those services were dropping to a level as schools started to close at the end of the year, and then we put those services on hold. So there's a good relationship with the operator as far as when they go. And I think they're costing about $500 a day per service for those additional services.
Good. That's sort of,
and it's funded as part of our normal.
Part of the overall contract makes provision for an overflow bus. You put them on when they're needed.
Yes.
They generally come off during the school holidays, and you phase them out during the period of which the school roll declines.
Yes.
Councillor Stella.
Thanks, Minik. I'm just looking at page 33. It's the one with 2 figures on it, figures 4 and 5. And just in terms of exploring the relationship between fare changes and patronage changes, and the half price fares were removed on the 1st of May 24. Aside from CPI changes, was that the main change in fares since eBus started? That removal of the half price?
That was by far the biggest change.
Yeah. And so the graphs seem to show quite a jump in revenue post that, and relative to the revenue, a modest decline in patronage. So does that say, okay, we remove those half price fares, revenue's gone up and there hasn't been a catastrophic drop in patronage, just a small drop. And so is that the interpretation we should take from those figures in terms of the relationship between fare changes and patronage changes?
It's been a while since I looked at that in a whole lot of detail, but I recall from when we were first looking at this, the effects of this, that we started looking at right down at the level of who we were losing from the system and who we were, what was happening. And what we've found is we lost a fair chunk of children, the younger children, or that middle-aged sort of the, if you like, it's hard to tell, but the 5 to 12 age group, because they were, it was just so cheap for them to travel. But then because there was an additional youth ticket type, if you like, that had been established for this half-price fare scheme, that dropped off, and that's when they were essentially what it seemed transferring over into the adult category. So overall, you're correct. We didn't see a catastrophic drop at all, but it was just a redistribution, if you like, amongst the type of fares that we were seeing.
Right, and just one final thought: is it possible also that kind of levelling off and slight decrease in patronage, aside from fare changes, might have been buying it, and then some people found it's probably not for me, and so on? I guess we can't discriminate between those two factors, the change in fares and the initial attractiveness of the service, and then people deciding whether to continue or not.
I think the change in fare, the half-price fares, was a very dramatic change in one go, but then the ongoing sort of stabilisation of the numbers, or reduction and then stabilisation, like you say, I think that does contribute. People had sort of, when the service was rolled out, there was a huge push with the promotional aspect of it, and there was a lot of energy around it, and a lot of people wanting to try it and see how it went. And there are a lot of new users on it compared to our in-bus system. I think we can't lose sight of that. Compared to in-bus, we're still miles above. But yeah, there is that stabilisation, which isn't unusual amongst once you get into public transport stuff. I think the key thing that we need to, I'd like to sort of just express also, is that we were not expecting that level of growth so quickly. We had really the growth we were expecting over 3 or 4 years, we had that in 2 or 3 months. So rather than that curve sort of happening gently over time, we saw that really steep growth. We were sort of sitting around the computer every month as we downloaded the data and got the final number and going, wow, this is pretty incredible. At what point is it going to...
My take on that, because I look at that very rapid uptake when we converted in September back in 23 over to the new e-bus service, was substantially faster than many other councils that have upgraded services. The credit for that belongs to some of our communications team, who did a very good job of coordinating an effective information campaign for people to trial our new buses. I just have one question with respect to the resolutions on the increase in the fares. You're asking us to confirm our approach of increasing the fares by the Public Transport Cost Index on the 1st of July. Is that the final decision we would make as a consequence of passing that resolution, or is it intended that you'll come back to the June meeting for the actual finalisation of what those numbers? Just want to be clear about what we're approving today.
Yeah, and it reflects on the comment about putting these new services into place as quickly as possible. If we have that final approval to make the change in July, then it would be September before we were able to put those fare changes in place. What we're saying is we'd like to have those fare changes in place for 1st of July for the next financial year.
Yes.
So carry that trend So we would be reporting back to you as to what the number of that change was, not the fact that we've made the change.
And so the piece I'm always interested in is when we're putting up the charges, I like to know what we're doing.
Yep.
Do we have any indications at this point as to what the public transport cost index would be and the percentage increase that there would be for our bus users on the 1st of July?
Not at this stage, because we use because there's a lag from when it's published. So we within the next month or two will know what the year to December 2025 index will be, and that's the one that we've used in the past to then increase the fares and on the 1st of July the following year, if you like. So we don't know quite what that is yet.
Look, and I understand that. Can you answer this question? For the two councils' public transport budget for 26-27, what assumption has been made about the increase in fares income from the 1st of July?
I think standard inflation rates that sit within the LTP have been applied rather than the public transport index. Off the top of my head, I can check that, but
Can I just be upfront with you about my level of comfort and look at this as a decision collectively for all of us? I'm very comfortable with proceeding on the 1st of July with a suitable inflation indexed increase in it. And if it's 3 or 3.5 or 4, I'm quite comfortable with giving the authority today. I equally have to say, in the middle of a cost of living crisis, when families are under even more pressure with pressure increases, if the PTCI moves by 6 or 7%, I'm going to be sweating. And I'm not as comfortable to give the authority today. And I'm just wondering, when we don't know what the public transport cost index has moved today, as to how we can handle that dilemma, I still might approve it if it is 6 or 7. But I want to think about it and see what other options we have.
So
have you got any solutions for me?
Through the chair, potentially you could approve that subject to a 5% limit. And if it's more than 5%, then we could push back that decision on the understanding that it would probably be September before that change was implemented if we make that decision in July.
I'm happy to take guidance from other members as to their view. Obviously, we would need to understand if we chose a different figure to the public transport cost index, there would be broader financial implications for both councils. It's just that I like to do the stuff with the eyes wide open. Councillor Stallard?
Just a couple of questions. If the budget for next year is based on the CPI and the long-term plan, and any discrepancy between that and the reality of the public transport cost index, that will just be met within operational budgets?
Yes, that's normally how we would run it, yeah.
Okay, and I guess if the index value we use is for the year, is it for the year, calendar year 2025, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, as a result of the lag between when the index is published versus when we need to make our decisions around increasing fares.
Yeah, I guess that's pretty recent geopolitical problems, so they wouldn't be too extreme. But just as an example, what has that value been in the years leading up to it? What's the trend? Have they been 2 to 3% and just shifting slowly?
Sorry, I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but from memory, it was around that 3 to 4%.
Yeah. One of my worries, was there any significant change during the calendar year to December 25 in road user charges that would adversely affect on the public transport cost index that anybody can recall? Go on. Can I tell you what I think we might do? Is 5 still making me sweat? I would like us to consider, this is just the start of a 10 for members to think about, passing that resolution, confirm support of the approach to increase fees on 1st July using the CPI up to a maximum of 4%, which will be communicated to the committee at the June meeting. And then what I want to say to officials, as soon as you get it, if it's in that sort of above 4 range, then I will liaise with Brent as the deputy chair, and we may call an urgent committee. I do want to resolve the issue of any fare changes by 1st of July, and it may be necessary for me to either call together a conference call or the like. So we're saying if it's under 4, proceed. If it's over 4, then elected members would like to chew on it and get some more information and potentially have a special meeting. Can you live with that?
I think that's a good compromise, and I think we can work to that. Yes.
Are you happy with that?
Happy to second that, Nick, and because my understanding was potentially 2 to 4% was the range we were talking about. I do note though that relatively 2 to 4% on $2.16 and $6.47 will still be well under the cash price of the casual tickets people play. So it's not a significant lever, I don't think, but I'm happy to second that.
The other part I'm a little bit nervous of, and can someone answer this for me? Both councils are under enormous financial pressure as they work through their annual plan. You'd have to be blind not to recognise the price of fuel going through the roof, and in the briefings we had yesterday as joint councils, the flow-on impacts that's having, whether it's from the presentation from 141. Who takes the risk around any fuel increase for the non-portion of the e-bus? Is there anything in the contract and any portion of the costs that go up as a consequence of the fuel price increase? Now, we're lucky with electric buses. If we didn't have electric buses, this would be really ugly. We'd all be sweating. Is there anything in the contract where there is a flow-on cost provision with our bus service?
So we have a cost index, an escalation index in the contract for most of the services. Obviously, that is linked to the electric vehicle index. So that there's two slightly different ones.
Yep.
And so we just have the one service, isn't it, that goes out to Motueka that is diesel.
Right.
So that would be subject to the non-electric one.
Yep.
But because it's such a small portion of the overall thing, we wouldn't expect it to be have nearly the more dramatic, change as if we were fully diesel.
Okay, so I think where we're at is we're going to go ahead with this resolution. In the event that the public transport index is more than 4.0, then officers are going to need to prepare a quick note about what we do. If they wish to proceed with an increase more than 4%, then the sort of information I would like to know is what's that budget looking like for the 26-27 year, and for us to then potentially have a Zoom special joint meeting of the Regional Transport Committee to help make that call, including advice from the officers about the flow-on impacts to our two councils' budgets. Councillor Stella?
Yeah, thanks, Mick. Did I hear it correctly? Are we actually using an EV index within the public transport cost index, or are we using one, because I just see here fuel, labour, material costs go into calculating it. So are we using one that would apply? I guess I'm asking, do our increased costs, is this an accurate reflection of this index, or is this index more fuel based than EV based?
No, so there's two parts to this. There's an electric vehicle index, and there's a diesel vehicle index.
Oh, really?
And so we apply those separately to the individual vehicles.
Great. And then finally, I guess if we are hesitant to increase prices above 4%, what we're then saying is either we meet that shortfall within operational budgets, or we come back to council and say, give us more money. As long as we're aware, that's what we're doing.
I think the choices, if it's more than 4%, are going to be difficult, but I just don't feel comfortable today just signing off whatever that increase comes through without it. But that is the difficult choices we will face if the index is above 4.
Can I just also clarify that will apply to just the B cards?
I'm assuming that with the cash card, the amounts are just so difficult for the drivers with change.
That's-
And they're
that's
going to
correct.
stay at the 3, 6 and 9.
Yeah.
And so my understanding is about a third of passengers pay cash.
That's correct.
So there'll be no change in the cash. There will be a change in the B card, albeit by September of 27, that'll become academic as we move over to the motor card. Am I correct there?
No, we will still be setting our own fees, and there'll be a decision to be made about whether there is cash, whether cash is included.
Right.
Still.
Can I ask, in those areas where they have moved over to the new Motu card system, are they continuing to offer cash? Not known?
I can't confirm that.
Decision down the track. Sorry to spring you on it. When we get closer to that time, there'll be questions I'll need to know. And frankly, that will be absolutely relevant to the decision this Regional Transport Committee takes next March as we look at the fares looking for 27, 28, which were the year of which we'll be making the transition over to the new Motu card.
Yeah, and to build upon that, we envisage as part of developing the regional public transport plan that we would have a discussion around fares, both on whether we continue to accept cash fares or whether it's appropriate to take that next step in cash fares at that time. So as part of developing our next long-term plan for passenger transport, we'll address that aspect.
Emma?
You can still pay cash in Christchurch, but the fares are higher than if you use the other options.
Okay, that's all helpful. I'm feeling pretty comfortable with those recommendations as amended. Are there any further questions on the public transport report? I'm happy to move from the chair resolutions 1, 2 and 3. Is someone prepared to second that? Thanks, Deputy Mayor Maru. Any debate? That being the case, let's put those. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. And welcome Emma to present the Whakakatahi update. More than relaxed if you wish to stay sitting there, all sit at the top table, Emma.
Oh, sorry.
Kia ora tātou. Right, as usual, I'll start with our national update of what's going on and then follow up with a regionally specific one. So as we've been discussing today, the RLTP and NLTP processes are well underway. And so we're looking to share a range of guidance during March on how to prepare the continuous program bids and the use of the Reg Transport Insights web portal as a key supporting tool for that work. In June, we'll have draft evidence to inform the improvements programs for the RLTPs. And then in August, we'll be getting everyone to put the draft continuous programs into TO. And that continuous programs are the programs that are ongoing in terms of your maintenance and operations of your network and public transport and so on. And that allows us to assess those and start the process of considering how we'll manage those. Then as we get through the year in October, we'll put out the draft investment prioritisation method. And you'll recall from the induction briefing that we're required by law when we have a new GPS to have a investment prioritisation method. We'll have a draft GPS out, so we'll do the draft IPM. If the GPS then changes following elections, we'll change that as well. And then in December, we'll look at having the final continuous programs and TO, including our ship, and then also the draft improvement activities, but remembering that they may change as a result of any changes to the GPS. We also need to confirm what the FARs will be. That's the funding assistant rates. And they're looking through and just testing and checking everything and making sure the data has been updated as necessary. Also, where we have a category of road called special purpose roads that was discontinued 10 years ago, they're either going to transition to normal FAR or to a bespoke FAR that will be arranged with individual road controlling authorities in the case of those roads. And we also establish our FARs for emergency works, mobility services, Super Gold and interregional rail. So that's a program of work that we need to do this year. One of the other things that you may not be familiar, there's lots of acronyms in here, but within our system, the One Network Framework is a really important classification system that we use across our whole network to identify the purpose of particular parts of the transport system. And so that's something that is required to be in RLTPs and being used for all of your modes when you are developing your plans. And that then it assesses how we look at those roads and how they are maintained over time. So it's a really critical part of the overall transport system. And previously we had something called the One Network Road Classification. So the ONF, or One Network Framework, replaces that. And for the types of roads we have here, urban connectors and transit corridors and so on, they have different types of activity, different weights of vehicles on them, different speeds. So it's actually a really important part of how we understand our transport network. So your officers will be all across this in great detail, so it may never really be part of what you're looking at on a day-to-day basis. The SHIP, our State Highway Investment Proposal, so that's our submission to the RLTP process. So we're in the process of developing that at the moment, and we look across all of the activities that we would like to be considering over the next 10 years or so, and then we look at what we can put through into the RLTP process. And we'll get the board to approve that and then submit that through the process. But again, that will be subject to change if needed. You'll be familiar with the roads of national significance that are progressing, and there are a few of those now in construction, and they are continuing to be investigated and developed according to the stage that they're at. I think I've got a slide on the Hope one a little later. And just as we were discussing earlier, Motomove, or the National Ticketing Solution, is continuing to develop and roll out. So it rolled out in November for the Greater Christchurch region, and they've started to roll out the travel concessions. So that's things like age group difference of age group fares and so on. And then they'll be introducing Motomove cards and looking to start the Wellington rollout early next year and Auckland later next year, and then smaller regions throughout 26 to 27. So it's a big program to roll out, and there's been quite a bit of complexity, but rolling it out in Christchurch has allowed time to resolve those issues stage by stage. A big change for us that is something that we do around every 10 years is we've changed our contract model and how we contract for state highway maintenance. So we now have what are called integrated delivery contracts, and we've been through the process now for negotiating and awarding contracts that will start on the 1st of May. And we then, with these types of contracts, we need to do more active monitoring and involvement in the quality control of those contracts. So we're growing some of the staff in the Nelson office, for example. And alongside that, we obviously need to finish our current program and close out the existing network operating contract, which is the previous contract model. So speed management, we have a requirement to implement all of the variable speed limits to state highway schools by 1 July 2026. And we need to also coordinate with councils where schools have gates that are on both state highway and local roads. So that's, I think I've got another slide on that, but it's on track. Improvements at high-risk rural intersections, that's where we bring in intersection speed zones and other speed limits. We don't have any other speed limit changes proposed in this region at the moment. There are a few that came as a result of changes that happened when the speed will change. So we're now in the process of prioritising those. But as I said earlier, if there are areas where the community feels that speed changes are needed, they can raise those with us, and we can have a look at those areas and put them in the program if that's appropriate. So coming back to the schools, we've got a program there showing that April is the target for Nelson and Tasman to get all of those variable speed limits in place. And we are underway with that and everything's on track.
Do we know, just going back to that slide, sorry to be a pain, there are 3 schools due to be done in April, 2 in Tasman, 1 in Nelson. Do we know the names of those schools?
I don't have that at my fingertips.
Okay.
But
sorry.
The main thing is they're on track. Okay, I'll just pause there before I go into the region if there's any questions on the national slides.
Yes, one question. On the slide that refers to the SHIP, the State Highway Investment Program, my simple question is this. Are RON's funding included in the SHIP process, or is it a separate budget? Here, just to be direct with you, I want to know, we've got the work on the SHIP for 27 to 37, starting late last year and moving through this year. The key issue for me is what priority is going to be given to the significant investment required to deliver the Hope Bypass. Will the priority of the Hope Bypass be determined in the SHIP, or is the funding for the RONs separate?
So the board is required to operate within a 10-year funding framework and to manage its investment through that timeframe. Currently, we have funding within the NLTF that is supporting the development of the RONs program and the business cases and the investigations, design work and so on. In terms of the full package of 17 RONs projects, there's not enough funding in the NLTF to fund all of those activities. So there'll be decisions made at some point by the Crown about whether they propose to put Crown investment into some of those, or whether it remains the responsibility of the board to schedule those as revenue allows within the NLTF.
But in short, RON's projects are included in the SHIP.
Yes, well, we're required to make sure that our contribution to the RLTP gives effect to the GPS, and so those RONs projects must be included in terms of giving effect to the GPS.
Okay, thank
but
you.
the funding will have to be determined separately.
Any further questions from colleagues with respect to the national issues before Emma turns to the regional? Nope, let's move on to the regional.
Okay, so the Hope Bypass is obviously something that we have discussed at the last RTC meeting, and since then we've awarded the design contract to Stantec and WSP, and that's for the detailed design and statutory approvals for the project. And so this week we started geotechnical assessments in areas along the alignment where we need to have greater information about ground conditions before finalising those designs. And we keep information available on our webpage, and we'll have updates there as appropriate. The one thing I would note is that the slide there is from the original investment case showing our two-stage implementation. There has been quite a lot of work done since then, and so the form of the intersection at Salisbury Road may well change from what's indicated in that picture, but that's still subject to further investigations and design work. It's been a really important year for us in terms of resilience work. So we have had a significant package of resilience works that was in place right across the region. So from the Whangamoas on State Highway 6, Birds Hill on 60, then heading south to Higgins Bluff, Howard's Narrows, Hope Saddle, Granity Narrows and O'Sullivan's. So a huge program of work there, looking both above the road where we had risk of rockfall onto the road, and below the road where there's drainage work and other things needed to improve resilience. And so we had a huge amount completed. There's some still ongoing, and we'll run through towards the end of this year. In terms of our maintenance and operations this year, had a huge program, and so we have done over 6 lane kilometres of pavement rehabilitation. That's the full dig out, nearly 28 kilometres of resurfacing, met a 100% repair on time rate for potholes, and renewed 24 culverts. So that's a major program, as well as going through all the processes around how we operate the network, changing to the new temporary traffic management, NZ Guide to Temporary Traffic Management, awarding our IDC contract to Fulton Hogan, and being on track for everything to be implemented. Just some examples of specific pieces of work. We had Motuaka High Street resealing program, including curb and channel repairs and resealing. We had a major weather event, which obviously we've been talking about earlier as well. A huge amount, over $45 million of damage to our Nelson Tasman State Highway network, including Rocks Road, Kahatu, Taka Hill, Coal Creek and Dillas. So again, major program of work. Particular highlight is around the pace at which we were able to resolve all of those key sites where we had major damage to the network. So Rocks Road is the only one that's still ongoing. Spooners, we had obviously with that tree fall there, quite significant risk to the road. Taka Hill, amazing work by the team there, just phenomenal pace, innovation, applying different ways of working to get all of those sites resolved and get things open by before Christmas, which was a huge amount of work. And when you look at some of the damage on those sites and the impact that it has, and particularly when we get those slips over the road and then the water goes in all directions. So going from that to roads open and hillsides stabilised, and that's a fantastic team there that did all that work for the communities that use the hill. Finally, just touching on how councils are going in terms of their spend forecast, seeing really good progress here. Nelson City pretty much on track, slightly behind on a couple of things, but that's also expected in terms of some of the emergency works that we've had in region. And again, really good tracking in Tasman as well. So that's the update from me.
Just the first question, and this community needs to be incredibly grateful for the rapid progress that has been made on improving the resilience of Rocks Road. I was pleasantly surprised at how quickly after the major storm event have got onto that project. The one part that I am confused by in the update is that my understanding is about $14 million is being committed by NZTA to the improved resilience on Rocks Road. Where does that fit in to the funding update for NCC? Are emergency works separate to those last two charts? Is it defined as emergency works? What's the bucket of funds of which we have been beneficiaries of in respect of the increased resilience on Rocks Road?
So those two slides are about council spend. The funding for the Rocks Road repairs is NZTA spend, and it comes out of the we have a contingency that we set aside at the beginning of each NLTP period and for emergency works, and that applies to both the state highway and then we also have one for local road networks. I think both of them have now been fully utilised, but we had so the 14 million covers the repairs program. It doesn't include the response, so there was additional funding on top of that. So yes, we have made some good progress there. We will be sending a community update out, I think, next week on progress and what's happening and what people are seeing, just providing a bit more detail about that. And we expect to have that fully completed about November.
Other questions from colleagues of NZTA's work program? Councillor Stallard.
Thanks, Nick. Just on the bar graphs that were the previous 2 pages in the slideshow, I wonder if we could flick to that. I don't understand the meaning of sum of estimated run rate spend to claim full allocation, which is the middle
the grey
item in the legend.
Yeah, I'm not sure who makes the keys for these. So basically, there's a forecast of spend that we have from councils, and so the forecast is essentially the grey. The blue is the actuals that's been claimed in TO, and then the blue is their full allocation for the 3-year period. So we would expect at various times that we will have a bit of grey where a council hasn't yet claimed something, or where events mean that they've rescheduled or replanned some of their work program. And we would get concerned if we had large areas in the grey that we didn't have an explanation for.
Okay, thank you. And just returning to the Hope Bypass, I understand for big projects you need to spend some money to get enough information to decide whether to go all the way. Is it usual for roading projects in recent decades that the design work will be done before funding for construction is locked in? Is that usual or unusual?
No, that is usual. You really need to do the detailed design work in order to understand, fully all of the cost implications for that project, and enable the decision makers to have all that information to hand before they make that final decision.
Deputy Mayor Maru.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. So just firstly, thank you in terms of the team and the reselling of State Highway 60 through High Street Motueka, because it's always a concern when you see pre-Christmas and when it's being done, but it was managed extremely well. Can I just ask a newbie 101 question? Far rate, what is the range? Is 51 the lowest? And what's the mechanism of assessing where you end up in that far rate? So I have no idea.
Sure. So we have a very high level of detail about this on our website. So what the board does is it sets an overall funding assistance rate of 53%. And it has decided that the lowest rate that we will contribute will be 51%. And so then essentially there is a series of factors that are assessed to identify that take into account the lane kilometres that the road controlling authority has, the cost of maintaining that network through what they've historically paid for it, the population in the region, so who the ratepayers are, and a deprivation index, so the ability of those ratepayers to pay. So those factors go into a formula, and it's essentially a ranking system, and at the higher end, it's around 68%, I think, in Gisborne, Tairāwhiti, and even higher in the Chatham Islands, but they are very unique in terms of the challenge of getting materials up there. Most councils would like to have a higher far rate, but it's a zero-sum game. So if a council gets a higher far rate, that means another council will be getting a lower far rate. So there's not an never-ending supply of money. So it is a tool to provide some differentiation based on the needs and complexity of each region, and also recognise that we can't expect every region to be the same.
And just to clarify, Nelson currently is on 51 and Tasman on 53. Am I correct in that? If officers or others can inform me.
51.
51. And Tasman is 51. We're both 51. We're both bottom. We're at bottom of the class. How regularly are the far rates reassessed?
You're awesome communities.
We want more, please. I think is the phrase.
I don't think you'd want your community to be worse off.
No, I don't want our community to be worse off. I just want more government money. How regularly are the far rates reviewed, and is there any reviews proposed in the next 3 years that this Regional Transport Committee?
So they're being reviewed right now.
Oh, they're being reviewed right now.
So not the policy, but just the inputs to that policy to just
the new inputs
update.
and see if there's any shuffling around. The only thing I would say to our good friends in Tasman is that when I look at your storm impacts last year, the NZTA level of support that you received meant that your ratepayers have a fraction of the cost. A lot more of our cost was another infrastructure of which we would have killed Alec to have a far type formula to meet some of the costs of our storm. The storm impacts were far worse for the Nelson ratepayers than the Tasman ratepayers, not because the storm did less damage, but because of the very successful far rate you got on your storm recovery works.
And through the mayor,
we call it neighbourhood envy.
We don't mind being the favourites.
Are there any further questions for Emma on her report? Just note the two councils were very appreciative of the workshop and the update on the Hope Bypass. Very significant work going on in the community on that investigation. We might have to have a further discussion as we get into the long transport plan. The previous Regional Transport Committee listed it as our top priority, and that's been taken on board by NZTA. We understand the timetable is for resource consents to be ready to be lodged in September, and that is part of the contract you have with Stantec and with WSP. And I know that will put substantive demand on both councils, just in terms of that investigation work and the good cooperation that we need to go on, and have great faith in the close relationship between NZTA and our two councils in being as supportive as possible of getting that investigation work done and done well.
Yeah, and we've had, we really appreciate the work that council officers are doing to support our work, to make sure that we're doing everything right in terms of what's appropriate to be done in that process.
It is such a significant project for the region, Emma. If it's appropriate, as that design work is completed, for there to be a further update for this Regional Transport Committee at the appropriate time, that too would be appreciated. I can see the resource consent timetable means that we may be in a position of July or August for us to receive a further update, and just get you to work closely with our officials as to when that is appropriate. We can also do it in confidential business if there are elements of it that shouldn't be released until such time as the consents are lodged.
Sure.
If there be no further comment from NZTA, no further items of business, then I shall close our meeting with a karakia. Tuia te karanga, tuia te rauhau, tuia te waho, tuia ki roto, tuia te hitangata, karanga te pau, karanga te ao, humia hui e, taia ki e. Thanks all members.